I froze behind the rose bushes when I heard my wife whispering to my own brother. He suspects nothing. Once he signs it, everything will be ours. My fist tightened until my knuckles turned white. I didn't step out. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there. In that moment, I understood this was no longer about paperwork. They thought they were preparing to end me. What they didn't know was I had been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time. This is a story about family trust and what happens when both are tested. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. What's the weather like where you are right now? I read these comments often, and they remind me we're all connected. A quick note. Some details are fictionalized to bring the lesson forward. What matters is the truth it carries. I stood in the rose garden at 5 in the morning, coffee mug freezing in my calloused hand, as my wife's whispered phone call 6 feet away shattered 11 months of marriage in 6 minutes. The fog sat heavy across the 850 acres of Caldwell Ranch that November morning, thick enough to taste the limestone dust and mesquite smoke. I'd come out here to cut roses for Briar yellow ones, her favorite, the kind my first wife Marte had planted 20 years ago before the cancer took her. The cardinals were already awake, their calls sharp in the gray dawn. My boots were soaked through from the wet grass. I rounded the large heritage rosebush near the back fence clippers in one hand, and that's when I heard her voice. "He suspects nothing," Briar whispered into her phone, her back to me. "The deeds are ready by Friday." I froze. My back pressed against the wet limestone wall. The coffee mug stayed suspended in midair like my breathing had stopped and taken my whole body with it. The cardinals kept singing, the fog kept rolling, and my wife kept talking. "Your lawyer can fly in Monday. Are you ready, Dre?" "Doctor," she said, "Doctre." My brother's name is Conrad, has been for 58 years, but our father, dead now 6 years, used to call him Dre when he was young. Nobody else alive knows that nickname, nobody except family. For 6 minutes I stood there, the wet cold seeping through my denim shirt. I didn't process the words with my brain first. My gut understood before my head did. This wasn't a stranger on the phone. This was my brother, and the woman I'd married 11 months ago. The woman who'd cried at our wedding. When the pastor mentioned Mart's name, that woman was conspiring with my own blood. The deeds, she'd said, ready by Friday. I own this ranch outright. 850 acres paid off mineral rights, intact oil royalties deposited every quarter. There are no deeds to sign unless someone's trying to make me sign them. Briar's voice dropped lower. I couldn't hear the rest. She ended the call, slipped the phone into her silk robe, and walked back toward the house. I stayed against that limestone wall until she disappeared inside. There are sounds you never forget, the crack of a rifle at dawn, the last breath of someone you love, and the whisper of your wife planning your destruction 6 feet away while cardinals sing overhead and yellow roses wait to be cut. I didn't go inside right away. I walked past the stables for 12 minutes with my cold coffee and wet boots until the breathing came back under control. Controlled breathing. 4 counts in hold, 4 counts out. The way they taught us in 1985, the first year I wore the uniform. By the time I returned to the kitchen, I'd brewed a second pot of coffee, and my hands were steady. Briar descended the stairs at 5:30, right on schedule, wearing the silk pajamas I'd bought her in Houston last month. She's 34, 29 years younger than me, with the kind of sharp beauty that turns heads in every room she enters. When we met at the Cattlemen's Association dinner last December, she told me she'd lost her own father to a heart attack 2 years prior. She understood she said what it meant to love someone and lose them too soon. She'd looked at Marty's photo on my office shelf and said the right things, all the right things. I'd believed every word. "How's the coffee today, baby?" she asked, kissing my cheek, her perfume, expensive and floral. "Today," I said, handing her a mug. "It's special." She smiled. She had no idea. We stood there in the amber light of the kitchen stone countertops, cold under my palms, and I listened to her talk about her plans, errands in town, a call with her sister, maybe lunch at the cafe. I nodded. I smiled. I sipped my coffee and watched her eyes searching for cracks, for guilt, for anything that would confirm what I'd heard in the rose garden. Nothing. She was flawless. That's when I activated what I used to call silent reconnaissance. It's a term from another life, a life Briar knows nothing about. Between 1985 and 1993, I didn't run cattle or check fence lines. I wore a uniform. I served as a judge advocate general officer in the United States Army, and my job was to investigate fraud, corruption, and conspiracy among personnel who thought they were smarter than the system. I learned a lot of skills in those 8 years: how to read people, how to follow money, how to dismantle a lie so carefully that the liar never sees you coming. And I learned rule number one, the rule that kept me alive in more than one situation. Never let the enemy know you know. You think you know the moment your life changes. A diagnosis, a phone call, a knock on the door at midnight. But mine changed in a rose garden at dawn. While I was holding flowers I'd planned to put on her breakfast table, and the woman I'd vowed to love was 6 feet away planning to destroy me. I kissed Briar's cheek. I poured her more coffee. I told her I'd be out checking the fence line and I'd see her at dinner. She smiled, touched my face, and said, "I love you." "I love you too," I said. I stood at the kitchen counter as she walked back upstairs, her lipstick fresh on my cheek, her perfume still in my lungs. She thought I was a simple 63-year-old rancher who'd forgotten where he put his reading glasses last Tuesday. She had no idea that for 8 years I'd been trained to dismantle conspiracies far more sophisticated than hers, and I'd never forgotten a single protocol. By 11 o'clock that night, I would open her laptop and discover just how long she'd been planning this. The hardest acting I ever did wasn't in a Pentagon briefing room or a Navy courtroom. It was 18 hours on a Sunday in November, pretending my marriage wasn't already over. By 8 that morning, I'd fed the horses, checked the water troughs, and walked the fence line on the southern 40 acres like I did every Sunday. Miguel Ramirez called my cell at 9. Miguel's 55, a weathered foreman in dusty boots and a sweat-stained hat, who'd managed the Caldwell Ranch for 25 years. With the careful hands of a man who noticed when horses were sick and when people were lying. "But Patron," he said, "that new mare looks off. Want me to call the vet?" "Go ahead," I said. "Bill it to the ranch account." Normal, calm, nothing different. I came back to the house at 10. Maria Ramirez was setting breakfast on the long oak table, scrambled eggs, bacon, biscuits with honey butter. Maria's 60. Miguel's wife and she moved through the ranch kitchen with the quiet efficiency of a woman who noticed everything, including the way Briar's smile never quite reached her eyes when she thought no one was watching. Briar descended the stairs in yoga pants and a white cotton shirt, her hair pulled back, looking like every Sunday morning for the past 11 months. Maria set her plate down and gave Briar a look I'd never seen before, something between pity and knowledge, the kind of look you give someone who doesn't know they've already lost. Briar didn't notice. I did. Maria left without a word. We ate breakfast. Briar talked about her plans to drive into town for groceries. I nodded and sipped my coffee and said the biscuits were excellent, which they were. My phone buzzed. Celeste. Missed call number 47 in 8 years. My daughter, 38, now an architect in California, hadn't spoken to me since Mart's funeral when she told me I hadn't loved her mother enough. I'd said nothing then. I said nothing now. Delete. 47 times she'd reached out. 47 times I'd hit delete. Today, I didn't even feel it. A text came through at 11. Conrad, my brother. "I'll come up next weekend with those ranch business papers we discussed." "Sound good, bro." Ranch business papers we discussed? We hadn't discussed anything. I typed back, "Sounds good. See you then." At noon, my son Hayes called from the Permian Basin. Hayes is 35, works the oil fields, has his father's practical voice, but not yet his father's wisdom about reading people. "A dad, new drill site's looking good. Thought you'd want to know." "Appreciate the update, son. And you doing okay out there?" "Doing fine. You take care." I hung up. Briar asked if Hayes was well. I said yes. She smiled and went upstairs to shower. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the clouds roll across the hill country and thought about 18 more hours until 11 o'clock tonight. You want to know the difference between a good operative and a great one. A good operative reacts. A great operative waits 18 hours, makes breakfast feeds, horses deletes his daughter's 47th call, and never lets his face betray a single thing. The day crawled. Briar drove to town. I fixed a broken hinge on the barn door. Miguel reported the vet said the mare had colic, nothing serious. Maria brought me lemonade at 3 and looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't. I thanked her and went back to work. Dinner was pot roast. Briar had made it herself, which she did sometimes when she wanted to play the role of ranch wife. It was good. I told her so. She beamed. We watched a movie, some thriller she'd picked. I don't remember the plot. At 10:30, she kissed my cheek and said she was tired. "I'll be up soon," I said. I waited in the living room until I heard her breathing settle into the rhythm of sleep. Then I walked down the hall to the home office, closed the door, and locked it. The laptop sat on the desk under the amber glow of the old brass lamp. I opened it. Password screen. Martland 1987. My first wife's name, the year we got married. Breyer had set it as the Wi-Fi password 11 months ago when she moved in, said it was a beautiful way to honor Marta's memory. I'd thanked her. She'd cried. She'd been using my dead wife's name to access the internet for 11 months, and she never once thought I'd use it to access hers. The laptop unlocked. I opened her email. 6 months of correspondence with someone named Brent Mercer. Houston address, a state attorney. The subject lines told the story before I even opened them. Delaware LLC formation. Asset transfers timeline. December closing preparation. I clicked one, skimmed it, clicked another. Delaware LLC. My ranch as the primary asset. Closing timelines December. Signature required from Vernon Caldwell on multiple documents described as routine estate planning. I kept clicking. There were drafts, revisions, timelines. A document titled Marital Property Waiver, Texas Community Property Override. Another called Irrevocable Power of Attorney, Medical Contingency. Every single one designed to strip me of everything I owned and hand it to someone else. Then I saw the file in her documents folder, Hoyt_strategy_v3.docx. She'd forgotten to rename it. Amateur mistake. The kind that ends careers and conspiracies. I didn't open it, not yet. I pulled the old Kingston USB drive from the desk drawer, the one I'd used in 1991, to copy files in a fraud case at Fort Bragg, and plugged it in. Copied everything. Emails, documents, files, the whole folder. 3 minutes. That's all it took. I ejected the drive, slipped it into my pocket, closed the laptop, and turned off the lamp. There are 3 ways a password can hurt you. It can lock you out. It can let someone in, or, like Breyer's, it can use the name of a dead woman you loved to help you destroy the living woman trying to kill you. I walked back to the bedroom. Breyer was still asleep, her breathing soft and even. I undressed quietly, slipped into bed beside her, and stared at the ceiling. That Wi-Fi password was the name of my dead wife. Breyer never guessed that Martha's name wasn't the lock, it was the key. And the file labeled Hoyt_strategy_v3.docx told me something. Breyer didn't know I knew, yet she had a whole other name, a whole other history. And I had exactly 6 months of evidence to prove it. By Monday morning, I'd be sitting in a church pew asking a pastor questions he couldn't answer. When you find evidence your wife is planning to destroy you, you have 2 choices: confront her immediately, or test who else already knows. I chose the latter. Monday morning, I drove to the small Llano County church outside of Sunday hours. The parking lot was empty, except for the pastor's old Silverado. I found Howard Lancaster inside, polishing the oak pews with lemon oil, the smell of wax thick in the air. Howard's 67, a weathered man with kind eyes and the careful posture of someone who'd spent 40 years listening to confessions he could never repeat. He looked up when I entered, set down his cloth, and smiled. "And Vernon," he said, "didn't expect to see you on a Monday." "And thought I'd stop by," I said. "Got a question if you have a minute." We sat in the front pew. Light came through the stained glass windows, saints in blue and red and gold, their faces serene and untouchable. The church smelled like old wood and candle smoke. "Fesbatan," I said, choosing my words carefully, "have you ever heard something in confession that you regretted not being able to speak of?" Howard went very still. He looked at me for a long moment, then turned his gaze to the window, to the saints frozen in their poses of blessing and sacrifice. The silence stretched, 10 seconds, 20, 30. "And sometimes," he said finally, his voice quiet, "confession privilege is the heaviest burden a priest carries." I nodded slowly. I imagine it would be. He looked at me again, and in his eyes I saw something I recognized from my JAG days, the look of a man who knew the truth and couldn't speak it, who carried knowledge like a stone in his chest. "Vernon," he said, "I can't—" "I know," I said. "I'm not asking you to." He exhaled. "Good." I stood, shook his hand, thanked him for his time. As I walked back to my truck, I knew. He'd heard something from Breyer, maybe a year ago, maybe more, something she'd confessed in the privacy of that wooden booth, something that had haunted him ever since. But he was bound by a privilege older than both of us, a seal that couldn't be broken no matter how much he wanted to warn me. The Catholic Church has kept secrets for 2,000 years, behind stained glass and marble confessionals. and I was sitting in a wooden pew in Llano County, Texas, realizing that one of those secrets was about the woman sleeping in my bed. I drove home. Briar was in the kitchen making lunch. I kissed her cheek and told her the pastor said hello. She smiled and asked if I wanted a sandwich. I said yes. Tuesday afternoon, I went to the Llano Clinic for a routine cardiovascular check I'd scheduled 3 months ago, back when my only concern was keeping my blood pressure under control and my cholesterol numbers where the doctor wanted them. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and old magazines. I checked in with the receptionist and sat down. 15 minutes later, a young woman in scrubs called my name. Vernon Caldwell. Aziz the Spore. I stood. She led me down the hallway to an exam room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of rubbing alcohol sharp in the air. I'm Leora, she said. Leora Bentley. I'll be doing your vitals today. So, she was 26, maybe 27, with gentle hands and watchful eyes. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd taken 1,000 blood pressures and knew how to make patients feel at ease. You remind me of someone I used to know, she said as she wrapped the cuff around my arm. Who'd? I asked. She paused just for a second, then pressed the button to inflate the cuff. Someone kind, she said quietly. Blood pressure looks good. I'll be right back. She started to turn, and that's when I saw it. On her desk next to the computer monitor and a stack of patient files sat a small framed photograph. A young woman with dark hair and luminous eyes laughing at the camera, standing in front of a field of bluebonnets. My breath caught. It was Marta, not as I'd known her at the end, thin and pale from chemotherapy, but as she'd looked at 30, before the cancer, before the treatments, before everything. The year would have been 1987, 36 years ago. She was wearing a yellow sundress and holding a straw hat, her smile so bright it hurt to look at. Leora saw me staring. Her face went pale. She started, then stopped. I'll be right back. She left the room quickly, almost running, and closed the door behind her. I sat there on the exam table, the blood pressure cuff still on my arm, staring at that photograph. Grief is a photograph you carry in your wallet until the edges fray. But seeing Marty's face at 30 on a stranger's desk was like someone had developed a negative I didn't know existed and hung it on a wall in a clinic that smelled like rubbing alcohol and broken hearts. Leora came back 5 minutes later with the doctor, a man in his 50s who introduced himself and ran through the rest of the exam with professional detachment. Blood pressure good, heart rate normal, cholesterol numbers from last month's labs were acceptable. Come back in 6 months. I nodded, thanked him, got dressed. Leora was at the nurse's station when I left. She looked up, started to say something, then looked away. I didn't ask. Not then. Not about who the girl in the photograph was or why a 26-year-old nurse in Llano County had a picture of my wife from before either of us had gray hair or grief or any idea what the next 30 years would cost. But I would remember her face. Leora Bentley, gentle hands, watchful eyes, and a photograph she'd fled from the moment I noticed it. I drove home thinking about Pastor Howard's silence and Leora's fear, and the way both of them seemed to know something I was only beginning to understand. That photo. I didn't ask who the girl was or why a 26-year-old nurse had a picture of my wife from 1987. But 14 days from that Tuesday afternoon, that girl would be the one who saved my life, and the pastor who couldn't speak would finally find a way to make his silence heard. Wednesday night, I would discover what Briar had really done to Marta's memory. There are 3 kinds of lies a woman can tell. You lies about money, lies about love, and lies about the dead, and only one of those is unforgivable. Wednesday night, 11 o'clock. I sat alone in the home office with the door locked and the amber desk lamp casting shadows across the walls. The house was silent. Briar had gone to bed an hour ago. The Kingston USB drive glowed faintly in the computer port. I'd spent 2 days thinking about Pastor Howard's weighted silence and Leora Bentley's photograph and the strange look Maria had given Briar at breakfast. But tonight, I needed answers, not intuition. I opened the files I'd copied from Briar's laptop and started searching. She'd told me back when we first met that she'd been married before, that her first husband had died of cancer, that she understood grief because she'd lived it just like me. I'd believed her. Now I opened a new browser window and started running searches. Death certificates are public record in Texas. So are marriage licenses. So are obituaries if you know where to look. I typed in every variation of her name I could think of. Briar Whitfield, Briar Ann Whitfield, Briar A. Whitfield. No results found. I tried searching for cancer deaths in the counties she'd mentioned living in: Austin, San Antonio, Fredericksburg. No results found. I searched insurance claim databases that are accessible if you know how to navigate the legal research portals from my JAG days: medical examiner records, hospital billing archives. No results found. No death certificate, no marriage license, no obituary, no medical records, no insurance claims, no first husband, no cancer, no grief. Nothing. I sat back in the chair, the glow of the screen washing my face in blue light, and let the truth settle into my chest like a stone. She'd lied about all of it. And then I remembered the day we met, 2 years ago, November 2021, the church basement grief support group that Pastor Howard led every Thursday night. I'd been going for 4 years by then, ever since Marte died. It helped sometimes to sit in a circle of folding chairs and listen to other people talk about the holes in their lives that would never fill. Briar had walked in halfway through the session, apologized for being late, and sat down in the empty chair beside me. She was beautiful. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing was the way she looked at the floor when Pastor Howard asked if she wanted to share. "My husband died of ovarian cancer in 2017. She'd said, her voice breaking. "Same year as your Martha. I know exactly what you're feeling." She'd looked at me when she said it, tears in her eyes, hand reaching across the space between our chairs to touch mine. "I'm so sorry," I'd said. "Me too," she'd whispered. "You want to know the difference between a thief and a predator. A thief takes your money. A predator studies your dead wife's medical records, learns the exact month she lost her hair, the hospital where she took her last breath, and uses that research to pretend she's grieving someone who never existed." I pulled up Martha's obituary. It had been published in the Llano County newspaper and the Austin American-Statesman, public record, available to anyone with an internet connection. Martha Elizabeth Caldwell, age 60, died March 14, 2017, after a courageous battle with ovarian cancer, survived by her husband Vernon, daughter Celeste's son, Hayes. Services at First Baptist Church. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the American Cancer Society. The obituary listed the hospital where she'd received treatment, Del Seaton Medical Center. It listed the hospice where she'd spent her final week. It didn't list the specific details: the chemotherapy rounds, the clinical trial that failed the morning she woke up and couldn't remember my name. But those details existed in medical records that were supposedly private. Supposedly. I opened another browser window and searched for data breaches at Del Seaton. Found 3 in the past 10 years. Medical records compromised. Patient information sold on dark web forums. HIPAA violations settled quietly out of court. Anyone with enough money and motivation could have accessed Marta's full medical history: cancer type, treatment dates, decline timeline, cause of death. All the information you'd need to perform grief like a doctoral dissertation. Marty died on a Tuesday in March 2017, holding my hand, asking me to turn our pain into a road for someone else. And 6 years later, a woman I didn't know yet was sitting in a church basement using my wife's death certificate like a blueprint to break into my life. I thought about the grief support group, how Briar had shown up exactly once, delivered her performance, and never returned, how she'd asked me for coffee the next week, how we'd talked for 3 hours at the diner on Main Street, and she'd cried when I told her about Marte's last words, and I'd felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. She'd given me hope, and I'd been so desperate for it that I'd never questioned where it came from. 3 months later, I'd proposed. 6 months after that, we were married in the same church where she'd performed her grief. Pastor Howard had officiated. I remember the look on his face during the ceremony. I'd thought it was joy. Now I wondered if it was warning. I looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. The house was silent, except for the hum of the computer fan and the distant sound of Briar's breathing from the bedroom upstairs. She touched Marta's grave to climb into my bed. She researched my wife's cancer like a doctoral thesis, and performed grief like Shakespeare in a church basement. That was the moment, 11:47 p.m., on a Wednesday in November, when I decided there would be no negotiation, no settlement, no mercy. I closed the laptop, turned off the lamp, sat in the darkness for a long time. By Saturday afternoon, my brother would be pulling into the driveway with a cake and a conspiracy, and I'd be ready. When you discover your wife and brother are conspiring to destroy you, you can collapse in despair, Or you can start counting how many people already suspected them and were waiting for you to ask. Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock, Conrad pulled into the ranch driveway in his black Lexus. Ellen Caldwell sat in the passenger seat, Conrad's sweet-natured wife in her mid-50s holding a pecan cake from the local bakery, wrapped in white paper and tied with string. She'd always been kind to me, Ellen, genuinely kind, and genuinely oblivious to the conspiracy her husband was building with his brother's wife. We sat on the front porch in the afternoon sun. Maria had brewed fresh coffee and set out plates. The cake was still warm, the pecans candied and perfect. Everything moving forward with the ranch business, bro? Conrad asked, cutting himself a second slice. He looked at Briar when he said it. She gave him a slight nod. Nothing dramatic, just a small tilt of her chin that said everything was proceeding according to schedule. Conrad relaxed, smiled, ate his cake. I watched them across the rim of my coffee cup and said nothing. The look between them wasn't the heat of lovers stealing glances across a table. It was the cold calculation of business partners checking if their timeline was still on track, partners who had investments to protect and deliverables to meet. And partners can be divided if you know how to drive a wedge. Ellen talked about her garden. Briar complimented the cake. Conrad asked about the cattle market. I answered everything with calm, measured words, the same way I'd answered 1,000 questions in courtrooms and conference rooms when I wore the uniform. They left at 6. Ellen hugged me goodbye. Conrad shook my hand and said he'd call next week. I stood on the porch and watched the Lexus disappear down the long driveway, red taillights fading into the hill country dusk. Briar went inside to shower. I stayed on the porch until the stars came out. Sunday morning, 6 o'clock, I sat at the kitchen table in the gray dawn light. Maria arrived early as she always did on Sundays to brew coffee before anyone else was awake. She moved through the kitchen in silence the way she'd done for 20 years, filled the pot, measured the grounds, set the timer. Then she approached the table, wiped it with her dishcloth in slow, methodical circles, and slipped a small folded note under my coffee saucer. She didn't look at me, didn't speak, just continued wiping the table with the same careful precision she brought to everything. I unfolded the note. The handwriting was careful, each letter formed with the deliberation of someone who didn't write often but wanted to be understood. Monday morning, 7 days ago, I heard her in the garden. Same person, same voice. 7 days. Maria had heard Briar's phone call in the rose garden a full week before I did. She'd been carrying that knowledge for 7 days, waiting for the right moment to tell me, waiting perhaps to see if I already knew. I folded the note into my shirt pocket and looked up at her. "Thank you, Maria," I said. She nodded, once turned back to the counter and poured my coffee. Texans have a saying, good help notices everything. Maria Ramirez had been noticing for 7 days longer than me, and she'd waited at the coffee table with a handwritten note because some things can't be said out loud. A conspiracy is like a three-legged table, wife, brother, lawyer, and if you can't break all 3 legs at once, you start by figuring out which leg doesn't know the others are already cracking. Monday morning, 11 o'clock, I told Briar I was flying to Houston for a cattle deal, kissed her goodbye, drove 3 hours south on Highway 71, past Austin, past the suburbs, into the glass and steel sprawl of downtown Houston. Sterling Prescott's law office occupied the 40th floor of a high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Oil money atmosphere, mahogany desk older than both of us, leather chairs that smelled like cigars and successful litigation. Sterling stood when I entered, silver hair, perfectly combed 3-piece suit, pressed sharp enough to cut glass. We'd known each other for 30 years. He'd studied under my father, learned oil and gas law from a man who'd built an empire on handshakes and mineral rights. Now Sterling held the keys to an $11 million trust no conspirator knew existed. I handed him the Kingston USB drive. "I need 3 things," I said. "Audit all her joint account activity for the past 6 months. Contact our old JAG colleagues at the Pentagon for a legal path to my brother's phone records, and break down the Delaware LLC structure she's been setting up." Sterling took the USB, turned it over in his palm, and looked at me over his reading glasses. "You're still a JAG," he said, smiling. "You're just wearing denim instead of dress blues. You think retirement means your skills go dormant, but a lawyer who spent 8 years prosecuting fraud cases for the Navy doesn't forget how to read a Delaware LLC shell company just because he's been raising cattle for 30 years. We talked for 2 hours. Sterling pulled up databases I hadn't accessed in decades, made phone calls to people whose names I'd nearly forgotten, ran preliminary searches that would take days to complete, but would tell us everything we needed to know about Breyer's financial movements, Conrad's communication patterns, and the lawyer in Houston who thought he was smarter than both of us. By the time I left, Sterling had a team assigned: forensic accountants, digital investigators, and a direct line to a JAG captain at the Pentagon who owed me a favor from 1989. When I left Sterling's office that Monday afternoon, I had a USB full of evidence, a housekeeper who'd been listening for 7 days longer than me, and a 65-year-old oil lawyer with direct lines to the Pentagon. My wife thought I was meeting a cattle broker. My brother thought I'd forgotten how to read a contract. They were both wrong. Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, the sheriff and I would be coordinating cameras, and my wife would be pushing papers she thought I was too old to understand. Thanksgiving is supposed to be about gratitude, but the one I was preparing for in 2023 would be about counting enemies at my own table and installing cameras while they pretended to pray. Wednesday evening, I drove to Clifford Townsend's house on the outskirts of Llano. The garage door was open, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting yellow light across a workbench scattered with tools. The smell of clean gun oil hung in the air. Clifford stood at the bench, a weather-beaten man of 70 who'd served as sheriff for 30 years and knew every family secret in the county, which ones were buried shallow and which ones were buried deep. He looked up when I pulled in, set down the rag he'd been using to clean a hunting rifle, and nodded. "Vernon, he said. Figured you'd be coming around." I handed him a copy of my findings. Not everything. Not the USB files or Sterling's forensic analysis. Just enough to show him what I was dealing with. He read it standing under that single bulb, his face expressionless, the way lawmen read reports when they've already heard worse. "They need cameras," I said. "At the ranch, tomorrow during Thanksgiving church service while everyone's out." Clifford folded the papers and handed them back. I know a nurse over in Llano," he said. "Marthy's niece, Leora Bentley. I'll have her install cameras tomorrow during church. She's careful. Won't leave a trace." I stopped. "How did you know Leora was Marthy's niece?" Clifford chuckled a dry sound like wind through mesquite. "In this county, how many people aren't related to someone? You think I'd forget a name like Martha Caldwell?" He was right. Small-town Texas isn't isolation. It's a web. Everyone knows everyone, and if you're patient, you can pull on the right threads and watch the whole thing unravel. "What do you need me to do after?" Clifford asked. "Watch," I said, "and when it's time, I'll call." He nodded, picked up his rifle, went back to cleaning. I drove home in the dark headlights cutting through hill country fog, thinking about the network I was building without Breyer or Conrad ever knowing it existed. One call from a Texas sheriff is worth 10 city lawyers because a sheriff who's been in office 30 years knows which families buried their secrets shallow and which ones buried them deep, and more importantly, he knows who's been digging lately. Thanksgiving morning, 9 o'clock, golden autumn light streamed through the ranch study window. The house smelled like roasting turkey and Maria's cornbread dressing. Somewhere upstairs, Breyer was getting ready for church. She came into the study wearing a cream-colored dress and carrying a stack of papers. 12 pages. She set them on the desk in front of me with a practiced smile. "Your brother wants you to sign this land management waiver for the West acreage before dinner," she said. "It's routine, baby, just like the ancestral ranch paperwork we did last year." I picked up the first page, pretended to glance at it, let my eyes unfocus slightly the way old men do when the print is too small and they've left their reading glasses somewhere they can't remember. "That land management waiver," I repeated slowly. Conrad's lawyer drew it up. "Brent Mercer. You remember him? He's coming to dinner today as a family friend." Of course he was. I set the page down and looked up at her. "Let me read it thoroughly tonight," I said. "I'll sign it after Thanksgiving." Her smile flickered, just for a second. Then it came back bright and perfect. "Of course," she said. "Take your time." She leaned down to kiss my cheek. "Thank you, baby." And that's when I saw it. Her hand, the one holding the papers. It trembled. Not a lot, not dramatically. Just a small involuntary shake like a wire pulled too tight. In 2 years of marriage, I'd never seen Breyer's hands shake. Not when she said "I do." Not when she moved into Marta's bedroom and hung her clothes in my dead wife's closet. Not when she lied about her first husband or cried at the grief support group or sat across from me at breakfast pretending she hadn't spent the night before conspiring with my brother. Her control had been perfect. Until now. A trembling hand is a tell older than poker. It means the stakes are higher than the player wants you to know. And when your wife's hand shakes for the first time in 2 years while holding a routine document, you know the game just changed. I smiled at her, kissed her back, told her the turkey smelled wonderful. She left the study, the papers still on my desk, her footsteps light on the stairs. I sat there in the golden autumn light and looked at those 12 pages. Land management waiver, West acreage, routine. Nothing about Breyer was routine. Not her grief performance, not her research into Martha's medical records, not her partnership with my brother, and certainly not a document that made her hands shake when I said I wanted to read it first. I opened the first page and started reading. The language was dense, legal jargon designed to look boring, authorizations for third-party management, mineral rights consultation, revenue distribution oversight. But buried in Section 7, Paragraph 3 was a clause that transferred decision-making authority for the West acreage to a Delaware limited liability corporation. The same Delaware LLC I'd seen in Breyer's laptop files. The same LLC that Sterling Prescott was currently dissecting with forensic accountants in Houston. This wasn't a land management waiver. It was a transfer of control. And if I signed it, I'd be handing Conrad and Breyer the legal authority to do whatever they wanted with 850 acres of my ranch. I closed the document, set it aside, looked out the window at the land my father had bought in 1964, and my mother had walked every morning until arthritis took her knees. Her hand hadn't shaken once in 2 years, not when she said, "I do," not when she moved into Marta's bedroom, not even when she lied about her dead husband who never existed. But that Thursday morning, holding 12 pages of paper she called routine, her hand trembled like a leaf in November wind. These papers were more important than she wanted me to know. In 5 hours, 14 people would sit at my table, and half of them would be enemies who didn't know I was counting. There are meals Texans call the Last Supper before war, and the Thanksgiving dinner I hosted in 2023 had 14 people at my table, half of whom wanted me destroyed and didn't know I was counting their glances. 5 o'clock, the long ranch table filled. It seats 16, but we only needed 14 chairs that night. The fireplace roared at the far end of the dining room, crackling mesquite and oak throwing amber light across the walls. Turkey and cornbread and Maria's pecan pie steamed on the table, the smell of butter and cinnamon and sage thick enough to taste. Breyer stood at one end playing hostess in a burgundy dress that caught the firelight. I stood at the other. Conrad and Ellen arrived with their 4 children, teenagers, and young adults who looked uncomfortable in their Sunday clothes and didn't yet know their father was trying to steal their uncle's ranch. Hayes sat to my left, fresh from the oil fields, smelling like diesel and West Texas dust. Miguel and Maria took seats near the kitchen, close enough to help if needed, but far enough to maintain the boundary between family and staff that Miguel insisted on, even after 25 years. Clifford Townsend sat at my right hand, playing the role of my old buddy from county days. He'd brought a bottle of bourbon and told stories about hunting trips we'd supposedly taken in the 90s. Pastor Howard Lancaster sat directly across from Breyer. His eyes carried the strain of a man watching someone he'd heard confess sins he couldn't speak about, sitting at a table pretending everything was holy. And then there was Brent Mercer, 47 years old, Houston estate lawyer, expensive gray suit that couldn't hide the nervous sweat on his collar. Breyer had invited him as a family friend, someone she'd met through church circles who happened to be in town for the holiday. I shook his hand when he arrived. "Pleasure to meet you," I said. "Pleasure's mine, sir," he replied. We both lied with perfect smiles. I'd seen Brent Mercer's name on 6 months of emails about Delaware LLCs and asset transfers and closing timelines. He'd drafted the 12-page waiver currently sitting on my desk. He knew exactly who I was, and I knew exactly what he was here to do. But we played our roles. When everyone was seated, Conrad stood and raised his glass of wine. "To family," he said, his voice carrying across the table. "To legacy." Everyone lifted their glasses. I lifted mine last deliberately slow and met Conrad's eyes across 14 feet of oak table and conspiracy. "To honesty, or," I said. The room went still for half a second. Forks froze mid-air. Breyer's smile flickered. Brent Mercer's hand tightened on his wine glass. Then Ellen laughed, oblivious sweet Ellen, and said, "To honesty and family both." And the moment broke. Conversation resumed. We ate. Thanksgiving dinner is supposed to be about gratitude, but mine was a chessboard disguised as a turkey platter, white pieces on one side, thinking they'd already won black pieces on the other, memorizing every move for the endgame nobody saw coming. I carved the turkey, passed the cornbread, listened to Hayes talk about the new drill site in the Permian Basin, and Ellen talk about her youngest daughter's college applications. Miguel told a story about a coyote that had been harassing the cattle. Maria refilled water glasses with the silent efficiency she brought to everything. And I counted. Every time Conrad's eyes moved, I tracked them. 6:10 p.m. Conrad glanced at Brent Mercer while reaching for the mashed potatoes. Brent gave a small nod. 6:15. Conrad asked if anyone wanted more wine. His eyes flicked to Brent before pouring. Brent's expression didn't change, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. 6:23. Conrad laughed at one of Clifford's hunting stories. Mid-laugh, his gaze shifted to Brent, checking, confirming. 6:37. Conrad mentioned the ranch's west acreage, how beautiful it looked this time of year. Brent smiled into his wine glass. Conrad saw it. 14 times in 90 minutes. 14 glances between my brother and a lawyer. He pretended to barely know each one. A silent confirmation that the plan was on track. The timeline was progressing. The papers would be signed soon. You want to know the difference between guilt and conspiracy. Guilt glances away once. Conspiracy glances 14 times in 90 minutes. Each look checking if the lawyer is still there, still nodding, still confirming the plan is on track. Pastor Howard ate in near silence. Every time Breyer spoke, his jaw tightened. He had heard something in confession probably a year ago, maybe more, and it was killing him to sit across from her at a table I'd set with Martha's good china. Clifford played his role perfectly, laughed at the right moments, told stories about county fairs and high school football. Never once let on that he'd coordinated camera installation at my ranch that morning while everyone was at church. Hayes asked me if I was feeling all right. I told him I was fine, just tired. He believed me because he's 35 and still thinks his father tells him everything. Breyer watched me eat, smiled when I complimented Maria's dressing, asked if I'd had a chance to look at the papers she'd left in the study. Not yet, I said, after dinner. She smiled, touched my hand. No rush, baby. But there was rush. I could see it in the way Conrad's knee bounced under the table, in the way Brent Mercer checked his phone twice during dessert, in the way Breyer's fingers drummed against her wine glass when she thought no one was looking. They were on a timeline, and something was making them nervous. We served pecan pie at 7:15. Maria had made 3 of them, 1 with bourbon pecans, 2 traditional. Ellen's children ate seconds. Hayes asked for the recipe to take back to his girlfriend in Midland. Clifford poured bourbon for anyone who wanted it. I ate my slice slowly and counted the final glances. 13, 14. Conrad pushed back from the table at 7:30 and stretched. "Mas hell of a meal," he said. "Vernon, you got a minute? Want to step out on the back porch for a cigar?" I nodded. "Sure." Breyer's eyes followed us as we left the table. I ate pecan pie Maria baked and counted 14 glances between my brother and a lawyer I wasn't supposed to recognize. Pastor Howard watched Breyer with eyes that carried a confession he couldn't speak. Sheriff Clifford sat at my right hand, pretending to be a simple old friend, and my wife smiled across the table like she'd already won. 9 p.m. that night, my brother would get me alone on the back porch and say 3 words that would define everything old men forget. The most dangerous thing you can do to an enemy is let them underestimate you, and my brother's biggest mistake was believing that 63 years meant I'd forgotten how to fight. 9 o'clock, Conrad led me onto the back porch. The temperature had dropped into the 40s, hill country air, crisp enough to see our breath. He pulled 2 cigars from his jacket pocket, handed me one, and lit both with a silver lighter Ellen had given him for their anniversary. The smoke drifted into the darkness beyond the porch light, disappearing into mesquite and juniper. "The hell of a dinner," Conrad said, leaning against the railing. Maria outdid herself. He nodded, took a long pull on the cigar. Let the silence stretch. Then, ranch business deal, still looking good, bro. I squinted at him. Let my face go slightly confused the way it does when you're trying to pull a memory from somewhere it doesn't want to come. "Which part?" I asked. "The one we talked about 3 weeks ago, the West Acreage Management contract." I paused, took a slow drag on the cigar, let my eyes unfocus slightly. 3 weeks, I repeated. Was that the Tuesday or the Thursday? Conrad watched me. I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, measuring whether this was genuine confusion or an act. I gave him genuine confusion, or at least the performance of it. "I think it was a Tuesday," I said slowly. "Or maybe Wednesday. Hell, Conrad, you know how the days run together." He laughed. Not a kind laugh. A small, mocking sound that carried 30 years of being the younger brother, the smarter brother, the one who went to business school while I stayed on the ranch. "Old men forget," he said. "That's all." I nodded slowly. Let the words settle. Let him see me accept them. "Yeah," I said. "Old men forget, some days entirely." His shoulders relaxed. The tension I'd seen at dinner, the 14 glances at Brent Mercer, the nervous energy in his knee bouncing under the table eased just slightly. He'd gotten what he came for. Confirmation that his older brother's memory was failing, that the papers Breyer wanted me to sign could be presented as routine, as simple as something an old man with fading faculties wouldn't question too hard. We finished our cigars in silence. When we went back inside, Conrad clapped me on the shoulder and told me to get some rest. I told him I would. Old men forget. My brother said it like a blade, like proof he'd already won. I memorized it like a headstone, the headstone I was building for his own plans, one underestimated conversation at a time. 11 o'clock, the house was silent. Conrad and Ellen had driven home with their children. Hayes had gone to bed in his old room upstairs. Breyer was asleep, or pretending to be. I locked myself in the home study. The amber desk lamp cast long shadows across the walls. On the shelf above my desk, between the photos of Marta and the kids and the trophy from the 1989 County Livestock Show, hung a small framed medal. Navy Achievement Medal, dated 1991. Breyer had asked about it once 11 months ago, when she first moved in. I'd told her it was my father's. She'd believe me. It wasn't. I sat down at the desk and looked at that medal for a long time. Then I turned in my mind to face the people who would one day read this story. The people who needed to understand why I knew what to do next. Navy JAG officer, 8 years, 1985 to 1993. Judge Advocate General's Corps, United States Navy. I prosecuted fraud cases, embezzlement schemes, and military legal violations across 3 bases and 2 overseas deployments. I learned how to read contracts the way surgeons write x-rays, finding the fractures and the rot beneath the surface. I was good at it, very good. In 1993, Marta told me she couldn't do it anymore, couldn't handle the moves, the deployments, the life of waiting for me to come home from places I couldn't tell her about. She wanted the ranch, wanted stability, wanted our kids to grow up in one place with dirt under their boots and family around them. So I resigned, came home, took over the family ranch when my father's health started failing, and I never talked about those 8 years again. Everyone assumed I'd been a rancher my whole life, simple, straightforward. A man who knew cattle and fence lines and nothing about Delaware LLCs or asset transfers or the kind of legal conspiracies that required 3 parties and 6 months of planning. I let them assume it, including my wife, including my brother. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 15 years. It rang 3 times. At Garrison. The voice was older, rougher, but I'd know it anywhere. "Walter," I said. "It's Vernon Caldwell." Silence on the other end, then, "Jesus Christ, Vernon." Yeah. Thought you were dead raising cattle in the middle of nowhere." "Close enough. Listen, Walter, I need something." "Name it." "Phone records, my brother Conrad Caldwell, last 18 months. Another pause. Walter Garrison was 62. Now FBI Deputy Director out of Dallas, a man whose entire career had been built on cases we'd worked together when we were both young and stupid enough to think the law could fix everything. "This official?" he asked. "Not yet." "Should it be?" "In about 48 hours, yeah." I heard him exhale. "What's he done?" "Conspiracy to commit fraud. My wife's involved. Houston lawyer, Delaware LLC, the whole playbook." "Shit, Vernon." "Yeah." 48 hours, Walter said. "I'll run it through channels quiet. Stay safe until then." "Will do." I hung up. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes after you hang up with an FBI deputy director who owes you favors from 1987. It's the quiet of knowing that in 48 hours, your brother's entire conspiracy will be mapped on paper like a crime scene photograph. I sat in that quiet for a long time, looked at the Navy medal on the wall, at the desk where I'd signed tax returns and cattle contracts for 30 years, at the door beyond which my wife slept dreaming of money she thought she'd already stolen. My wife thought I was an old cowboy who'd forgotten where he put his reading glasses. My brother thought I was forgetful enough to sign papers I didn't understand. They were both wrong about everything, but especially about 1985 to 1993, the 8 years I spent learning how to dismantle conspiracies far more sophisticated than theirs. Saturday afternoon, a 26-year-old nurse would hand me evidence that would change everything, and I'd finally understand why Marta's photo sat on her desk. Sometimes the dead protect you better than the living. They just need to send the right messenger, and Marta sent hers 6 years after her last breath. Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock, Leora called my cell. "Mr. Caldwell." She said, her voice professional and careful. "This is Leora Bentley from the clinic. I wanted to follow up on your cardiovascular appointment from last week." "Everything all right?" I asked. "Yes, sir. But I'd like you to come in this afternoon if you're available. Just a quick follow-up." I knew what she was really saying. I drove to the Llano clinic. The waiting room was empty on a Saturday, the receptionist's desk unmanned. Leora met me at the door and led me past the examination rooms to a small medical file room in the back. The smell of rubbing alcohol and antiseptic hung heavy in the air. She locked the door behind us. Then she handed me a manila envelope. No words, just the envelope, her eyes meeting mine, with an intensity that said everything I needed to know. I opened it. Inside, purchase receipts from a Houston pharmacy dated 3 weeks ago. Midazolam, purchased under a name I didn't recognize, Jennifer Hartley, but with a billing address I did my ranch. And a USB drive. 48 hours of camera footage, Leora said quietly. From the ranch. I installed them during the Thanksgiving church service like Sheriff Townsend asked. I looked at the receipts again. Midazolam. And this... Leora continued, her voice steady, but her hands trembling slightly. 6 months ago, your wife came to this clinic asking for your first wife's medical files. She said she was family researching ovarian cancer history for prevention planning. I looked up sharply. I gave them to her, Leora said. I shouldn't have, but she seemed sincere. She knew details, dates, treatment centers. I thought she was telling the truth. You couldn't have known, I said. She nodded, but the guilt was written across her face. I didn't ask why she was helping me. I had a guess. But I had to wait 4 more days for her to tell me the truth. Midazolam is a sedative used in hospitals for end-of-life care and assisted euthanasia, and my wife bought it under a fake name 3 weeks after I overheard her conspiracy in the Rose Garden. I drove home with the envelope on the passenger seat and thought about the difference between attempted murder and actual murder. The difference is timing and witnesses, and whether you have a 26-year-old nurse who noticed something wrong 6 months before you did. Tuesday evening, Leora asked me to meet her at the Llano County Cemetery. The sun was setting late autumn light, filtering through bare trees onto rows of limestone markers. The air smelled like cedar and cold earth. She was waiting by a grave near the back fence holding fresh wildflowers, bluebonnets, and Indian paintbrush out of season, but preserved somehow. I walked to where she stood. Martha's grave. Martha Elizabeth Caldwell, 1957 to 2017. Beloved wife, mother, friend. Turn pain into road for someone else. Leora laid the flowers at the base of the headstone, her hands gentle, deliberate. Then she turned to me, with tears in her eyes. I'm Martha's distant niece, she said. She was my aunt. I was 20 when she died. She always said you were the kindest man she ever met besides her father. I opened my mouth, closed it. No words came. My mother was Martha's younger cousin. Leora continued. We lived in San Antonio. Martha used to visit when I was young. She'd bring me books about nursing, tell me stories about helping people. When she got sick, I was in nursing school. I came to see her the week before she died. The tears fell freely now. She talked about you, Leora said, about how you'd taken care of her through every treatment, every setback, every terrible night. She said if anything ever happened to you, someone needed to be watching. Someone needed to protect the man who'd protected her. I still couldn't speak. When that woman came to the clinic 6 months ago asking for Marta's medical records, Leora said something felt wrong. No real family member would need to ask for records they should already have. No one researching cancer prevention would need treatment timelines from someone who died 6 years ago. She wiped her eyes. So I started watching quietly, and when Sheriff Townsend called me 2 weeks ago asking for help, I knew why. We stood there in silence, 5 full minutes. The sun sank lower, turning the hill country sky orange and purple and gold. The bare trees threw long shadows across the limestone markers. Somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird called. I couldn't find words because there weren't any. Martha had died 7 years ago. I'd buried her here on a cold March day while rain turned the cemetery to mud, and my children stood on either side of me, silent and broken. I'd thought that was the end. That grief was the final chapter. But it wasn't. There are silences that say everything words can't, and standing at Marta's grave with her niece for 5 minutes, while the sun set over the hill country, I understood that my first wife was still protecting me 7 years after cancer took her breath. Finally, I managed 3 words. "Thank you, Leora." She nodded, touched the headstone, turned and walked back toward her car. I stayed until the sun disappeared completely, and the cemetery lights flickered on, one by one, casting pools of yellow across the graves. Marta never left. She sent her niece, a 26-year-old pediatric nurse who was 20 when her aunt died, to stand watch 6 months before I even knew I needed protecting. That photo on Leora's desk wasn't nostalgia. It was a mission. Wednesday morning, my wife would place those 12 pages in front of my coffee again, and this time, her hand would shake even harder. When someone keeps pushing you to sign papers, they call routine. You can ask yourself 2 questions. Why are they pushing so hard? And what happens if you pretend to agree while scanning every page to a lawyer 3 hours away? Wednesday morning, Breyer placed the 12 pages in front of my coffee for the second time. Her voice carried careful urgency, the kind that sounds like concern, but reads like pressure. "Your brother is coming this weekend hoping to settle this," she said. "Can you just look at it this afternoon and sign it after lunch?" I pretended to glance at the top page, let my eyes go slightly unfocused the way they do when the print is small and the concepts are big. Then I nodded slowly, like an old man accommodating a request he doesn't quite understand, but wants to make his wife happy. "Sure, baby," I said, after lunch. Her shoulders relaxed. She kissed the top of my head and went upstairs to shower. The moment I heard the water running, I spread all 12 pages across the kitchen table, pulled out my phone, photographed each page carefully, making sure every word was legible, every signature line visible. Then I composed an email to Sterling Prescott with the subject line, "Need full breakdown by tomorrow night." Attached all 12 photos. Hit send. The coffee had gone cold by the time I was done. Thursday night, I locked myself in the study and called Sterling. While his line was ringing, Walter Garrison's overnight package arrived Conrad's phone records for the past 18 months, printed on federal letterhead. Sterling answered. I conferenced in Walter. Both men I'd trusted with my life in different decades, different contexts. "Talk to me about the waiver," I said. Sterling's voice was clinical the way it got when he was reading contracts that would hold up in court. "This isn't a land management waiver," he said. "It's a specific power of attorney for ABC Delaware Holdings, LLC. Signing this grants the LLC authority to execute asset transfers in your name without further consent." I closed my eyes. In English. "It's sign this and they can sell your ranch without asking you again." Christ. "Gets worse," Sterling continued. Page 11, paragraph 7. "There's a clause authorizing the LLC to establish irrevocable trusts using your assets as corpus, meaning they can lock your property into legal structures you'd need years of litigation to undo. A power of attorney isn't dangerous because of what it says on page 1. It's dangerous because of what it authorizes on page 11 in legal language designed to look routine. And my wife was betting I'd never read past page 3. Walter cleared his throat on the line. "Vernon phone records arrived? 18 months. You want to start with March 2021. I opened the package. Pages and pages of call logs, timestamps, duration records. "What am I looking for?" I asked. "Pattern," Walter said. "Always start with the pattern." I read for 3 hours. Conrad had called Brent Mercer 47 times in the past 8 months starting last April. Regular check-ins, coordination calls, the conspiracy timeline I'd already suspected. But 18 months ago, Conrad had called Breyer 312 times. 312, and the critical detail, the one that made my coffee from this morning churn in my stomach, the very first call on March 17th, 2021, had originated from Breyer's number to Conrad's. Not the reverse. She'd called him first. Friday morning, I drove to Clifford's office and spread the phone log printouts across his desk, like crime scene photographs. We built the timeline together with military precision. March 17th, 2021, 47-minute call from Breyer's number to Conrad's mobile. I pulled up the Llano County Register archives on Clifford's computer, searched March 2021. There it was, front page, March 15th, 2021. Local rancher closes major Permian Basin oil royalty deal. Public information. Anyone could read it. My name, the acreage, the estimated quarterly revenue. 2 days later, Breyer called my brother. Clifford tapped the timeline with a weathered finger. March 17th, 2021, he said, 2 days after your oil deal hit the register. I nodded. 312 calls before she ever met you, Clifford continued. She recruited him first. Over the next 18 months from March 2021 through late 2022, Breyer and Conrad exchanged 312 phone calls, planning, coordinating, building the framework for a conspiracy that wouldn't activate until she'd infiltrated my life. And then, in late 2022, she walked into the church grief support group I'd been attending for years, sat down beside me, told me her husband had died of the same cancer that killed Marta, told me she understood my pain. By the time we met, she'd already spent 18 months turning my brother into a weapon. Clifford leaned back in his chair. She didn't recruit him because he was smart or capable, he said. She picked him because he was the cheapest insider you had already broke from the crypto crash, already bitter, already desperate. The hardest truth I learned that Friday morning wasn't that my wife was a predator or that my brother was a conspirator. It was that my brother was also prey-recruited 2 days after a newspaper article by a woman who understood that desperate men are the cheapest assets to buy. I'd been so focused on Conrad's betrayal that I hadn't seen what Clifford saw immediately. My brother wasn't the architect of this conspiracy. He was a tool, a means to an end, a broke, bitter man who'd been given a lifeline by a woman who knew exactly how to weaponize his resentment. That didn't excuse what he'd done, but it reframed everything. I gathered the phone records and drove home in silence, thinking about March 17th, 2021, and a 47-minute phone call that had set all of this in motion. My brother wasn't the primary enemy. He was a pawn recruited by a grandmaster who read the Llano County Register, found the cheapest insider in my family tree, and spent 18 months turning him into a weapon. The woman sleeping in my bed wasn't just a thief, she was an architect. Monday morning, I'd be flying back to Houston to finalize the counterplan, and my father's old safe would reveal a secret that would change how I saw my brother forever. When you discover your wife is trying to steal $11 million and poison you with midazolam, you have 3 choices: hide, fight, or set a trap. So perfect she walks into federal custody thinking she's already won. Monday morning, 10 o'clock, I sat across from Sterling Prescott's mahogany desk on the 40th floor of a Houston high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows framed the downtown sprawl. Glass and steel towers reflecting morning sun, highways ribboning through concrete like arteries through a body that never stopped moving. Walter Garrison's voice came through the speakerphone, sharp and clear from the FBI Dallas office. "Vernon," he said. "Sterling, let's talk options." Sterling had 3 file folders laid out on the desk. Blue, red, green. He tapped the blue one first. "Option 1, he said. "Feign compliance. My firm prepares a fake waiver that looks identical to the one Breyer gave you. You sign it in front of her. She thinks she's won, but the document never executes wrong notary missing witness invalid date stamp. Legally worthless. Buys us time to coordinate federal response." He moved to the red folder. Option 2, emergency court order. "We file tomorrow morning requesting immediate asset freeze and temporary restraining order against Breyer and Conrad. Judge reviews the evidence phone records midazolam receipts Delaware LLC structure. Assets locked within 48 hours. Conspiracy revealed immediately." He tapped the green folder last. Option 3, full FBI coordination. Walter's already working the interstate fraud angle, but this path requires what we call a trigger event. Walter's voice cut through the speaker. "Meaning, I need them to attempt something illegal on the ground, not just planning. They have to move first. Signing fraudulent documents is one thing. Actually, attempting to transfer assets or commit harm that's federal." "Busts, what's the timeline?" I asked. Option 1. Sterling said, "Gives us 2 to 3 weeks before they realize the paperwork is invalid." Option 2 triggers immediate confrontation, no turning back. Option 3 depends on how fast they move after you sign. I looked out the window. 40 floors down, Houston moved like it always did, oblivious to the wars being planned in conference rooms and law offices. "What happens if I choose option 1 and they move faster than we expect?" I asked. Sterling's face was grim. "Then you're holding a worthless piece of paper, while your wife has a real power of attorney she thinks is valid, and midazolam she's already purchased." Walter spoke up. "Vernon, I've been doing this 30 years. Predators like your wife don't wait once they think they've won. She'll move within 72 hours of you signing. We need surveillance in place before that signature happens." Military strategists have a saying: the best defense isn't a wall. It's making your enemies so confident they walk past your position into a kill box. They designed themselves, and Plan A was building that kill box from paperwork and patience. I thought about Breyer's trembling hand on Thanksgiving morning, the 14 glances Conrad gave Brent Mercer at dinner, the 312 phone calls before she ever pretended to grieve at a church support group. I thought about Marthy's niece handing me midazolam receipts in a locked file room. I thought about my brother broke bitter weaponized by a woman who'd read a newspaper article and made a 47-minute phone call. What does option 1 actually require from me? I asked. Sterling pulled a document from the blue folder. You signed the real waiver, not the fake one, the actual power of attorney Breyer gave you. I stared at him. The real one. The real one, Sterling confirmed. Because if we give her a fake and she suspects she runs, we need her to believe she's won, completely, totally, no doubt in her mind. And then she makes her move, Walter said through the speaker. Attempts to transfer assets, attempts to execute the medical authorization, attempts anything that crosses state lines or involves federal instruments. The moment she does, we have nexus, federal fraud, interstate conspiracy, FBI jurisdiction. How do you know she'll make a move? I asked. Because she's already bought the midazolam, Walter said flatly. That's not a maybe, that's a when. The room went quiet. Now I looked at the 3 folders, blue, red, green. Hide, fight, or trap. Option 1, I said. I'll sign the real waiver in front of her, make her think she's won, and wait for the trap to spring. Sterling nodded slowly. You understand what you're authorizing. This gives her legal authority temporarily to make financial and medical decisions in your name. How temporarily? 72 hours, Walter said. Maybe 96. The moment she moves, we move. But Vernon, you need to understand if she moves faster than we can respond, or if something goes wrong with surveillance. I know, I said. There's a particular kind of fear that comes from choosing to sign a document your wife could use to kill you. Not the fear of dying, but the fear that you've miscalculated the timing by 48 hours and the trap won't spring fast enough. But I'd spent 8 years in the Navy learning how to calculate risk, learning when to wait and when to strike, learning that sometimes the best move is the one your enemy never expects because it looks like surrender. Sterling pulled out a pen. We'll need surveillance at the ranch, he said. Cameras, audio, the works. Leora already installed some during Thanksgiving. We'll coordinate with Sheriff Townsend to add more. When I asked. Tonight, Walter said. Tomorrow at the latest, because the moment you sign that document, the clock starts. I took the pen. Plan A required me to look my wife in the eye and sign a power of attorney that would let her transfer $11 million I didn't have and authorize medical decisions with the midazolam she'd already bought. Sterling called it controlled detonation. Walter called it federal bait. I called it betting my life on a JAG skill I hadn't used since 1993. Tuesday night, I'd open my father's safe for the first time in 12 years and discover why my brother hated me his whole life. The worst secrets aren't the ones that destroy you. They're the ones your father kept to protect your brother, and in hiding them, guaranteed the hatred that would last a lifetime. Tuesday night, I opened my father's old ranch safe for the first time since his funeral 12 years ago. The combination was still there, locked in the same part of my brain that remembered how to saddle a horse and check fence lines in the dark. 3 turns right, 2 left, 1 right. The heavy door swung open with a metallic groan. Inside, beneath stacks of old property deeds and my mother's jewelry wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, I found a stack of documents bound with a rubber band, so old it crumbled when I touched it. Handwritten letters, my father's precise script, the kind formed by a man who'd learned to write before ballpoint pens existed. Each letter documented the same thing: a wire transfer for $400,000 dated July 1998, sent to First National Bank of Austin, with a memo line that read, C. Caldwell Auto Debt Settlement. Conrad's car dealership, the one that had failed that summer, the one Conrad told everyone he'd closed, voluntarily sold. The inventory paid off the loans himself. He'd lied. Our father had saved him. Paper clipped to the top of the stack was a handwritten letter on ranch stationery dated 3 weeks before our father died. A draft. Never sent. The paper still crisp, the ink still dark. I read it standing in that safe room, the smell of old paper and metal thick in the air. Conrad, I'm writing this because your mother says I need to tell you the truth before I'm gone, but I don't know if I'll have the courage to mail it. In July 1998, I paid $400,000 to save your dealership from bankruptcy. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to think you stood on your own 2 feet, that you were strong enough to survive without help. Looking back now, I was wrong. You will hate your brother your whole life because I hid this truth, and that hatred is my fault, not his. I pray someday you'll forgive me for the lie and forgive Vernon for the crime of being the son I didn't have to rescue. Your father. I sat down on the floor. Read it again. And again. 30 years. 3 decades of Conrad looking at me like I was the enemy. Like I'd stolen something from him. Like our father had loved me more. And the whole time, the truth was sealed in a safe neither of us opened. There are lies parents tell to protect their children, and then there are lies that guarantee the children will destroy each other. My father's $400,000 secret was the second kind, and he knew it before he died, but never found the courage to mail the letter. Before I tell you what happened Thursday in that garage, I need your read on this. Comment A, if you'd confront your brother with this truth, or B, if you'd let it stay buried and add one reason why in 5 to 10 words. Please note, the dialogue ahead is recreated for storytelling, but the core truth remains. Thursday afternoon, Conrad pulled into the ranch driveway in his black Lexus. I'd called him the day before and told him the waiver was ready, that he could pick it up whenever he wanted. He came at 2 o'clock. I met him in the garage. He was checking the oil in his truck, something he did every time he visited, a habit from the dealership days, when he'd learned that maintenance prevented breakdowns. I didn't waste time with small talk. Did you know Dad paid $400,000 to save you in '98? Conrad froze mid-motion, the oil dipstick suspended in the air between the engine and his hand. His face went pale. 30 seconds of silence. Then, what did he tell you about it? I shook my head. Nothing. I found it in his safe 2 nights ago. Conrad stood there motionless, the dipstick still in his hand. I watched his face cycle through emotions I couldn't name, shock, anger, something that looked like grief, but harder. Then he laughed. Not a real laugh, a dry, bitter sound that came from somewhere deep in his chest, the kind of laugh that carried no humor, only decades of misplaced anger finally finding its target. So now you think I owe you, he said. I didn't answer. He wiped the dipstick with a rag from his pocket, slammed the hood shut. The metallic bang echoed through the garage. Then he walked to his Lexus, got in, and drove away without another word. I stood in that garage for a long time, after he left, smelling motor oil and old concrete, listening to the wind move through the mesquite trees beyond the fence line. A dry laugh in a Texas garage is what tears look like when a man learned 60 years ago that crying doesn't fix engines or pay bills. So he trained his grief to sound like mockery instead. And my brother had been practicing that laugh since 1998. He didn't cry, he didn't apologize. He didn't even ask why our father had hidden it. Conrad just laughed that dry, bitter sound Texans make when the truth finally arrives 30 years too late to change anything. That's how Texans cry when they can't afford the tears. I went back into the house. Briar was in the kitchen making dinner, humming to herself, like everything was normal. Like she hadn't recruited my brother 18 months before we met. Like she hadn't bought midazolam under a fake name and hidden it somewhere I hadn't found yet. I kissed her cheek and told her dinner smelled good. She smiled and asked how my day was. I said it was fine, and I thought about my father's letter still sitting in the safe, and my brother's dry laugh still echoing in my ears, and the federal trap I'd agreed to spring by signing a document that could kill me. Friday morning ranch cameras would capture my wife making a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear, and my brother's phone would ring 11 times in 3 hours. Friday, December 13th, 2023, the kind of cold that made fence posts crack at dawn. I was in the study reviewing bank statements when I heard Briar's voice through the heating vent, sharp-clipped, nothing like the soft drawl she used around me. The ranch's old ventilation system carried sound in strange ways. I'd discovered that accidentally during my first winter here. I don't care if he's nervous, she was saying into her phone. We're doing this next week. I set down my pen, listened. Tell Conrad if he calls that Houston lawyer one more time, I'll handle him myself. Brent Mercer charges $400 an hour to tell people what they already know. A pause. Her heels clicked across the kitchen tile. The timeline's accelerated. Vernon's been too curious lately. Last night he asked about the Delaware accounts again. My hands went cold. No, listen to me, Conrad's the problem. He wanted to wait until spring. Spring like we're planting wheat instead of... Another pause. I know what we agreed, but your partner's falling apart. Yesterday he called me 6 times asking what happens if Vernon finds the Midland County records. I pulled out my phone, opened the recording app Sterling Prescott had taught me to use. Hit record. I've been doing this since I was 22, Breyer continued. Brooklyn Phoenix, that tech executive in Portland, they all thought they were careful too. The difference is, I actually commit to the plan. The heating system carried every word with crystal clarity. Next Friday, the papers are ready, the witnesses are paid, and I've already established the medical narrative. Vernon had a heart episode last month. Dr. Sanchez documented confusion, disorientation, exactly what we need for the competency hearing. My chest tightened. The appointment she'd insisted on. The medications she'd been managing. Tell Conrad he'll get his $3 million when the trust dissolves. But if he backs out now, he gets nothing, and I will burn him. She ended the call. I heard her heels moving toward the hallway. I shut off the recording, slipped the phone into my desk drawer, and was reviewing bank statements again when she appeared in the doorway. "Then there you are," she said, all sweetness. "Have you taken your heart medication today?" Yes, pattern interrupt 1. The ranch foreman's wife had called the previous week, mentioned seeing Breyer at a Houston pharmacy 2 hours before she claimed to have picked up my prescription refill in Austin. Different direction, different timing. I'd filed that detail away. "Not yet," I said. "Vernon." She moved into the room with practiced concern. Dr. Sanchez was very clear about the morning dosage, especially after last month. She produced the pill bottle from her cardigan pocket, shook out 2 white tablets. "These look different," I observed. "Generic version. Insurance wouldn't cover the name brand anymore." She filled a glass from the study's water pitcher. "Come on, you know how important this is." I looked at the pills in her palm, at her eyes watching me with an intensity that didn't match her gentle tone. "I'll take them with breakfast," I said. "Want to eat something first?" "The instructions say take on an empty stomach." "I don't remember Dr. Sanchez saying that." "He told me directly." She stepped closer. "Vernon, you scared me last month. That confusion, the way you couldn't remember simple things. I'm trying to help you." The woman who'd just threatened to burn my brother stood there radiating wifely devotion. "I appreciate that," I said carefully, "but I'll call Dr. Sanchez myself, confirm the dosage." Something flickered across her face, gone in an instant. "Of course," she said lightly. "I'll leave them here on your desk, but please take them soon. I worry about you." She set the pills beside my coffee cup and left. I waited 30 seconds, then called Clifford Townsend. "Let's need those pills tested," I said when he answered. "Today." "I'll send someone," he replied. "Don't touch them with bare hands." Pattern interrupt 2. My father had left a letter in his safe. I'd found it 3 days after his funeral, sealed in an envelope with my name. One line still burned. "The worst betrayals come from people who've learned to fake love better than others feel it genuinely." Saturday morning, I woke to chest pain. Not severe, but present. A tightness that made breathing deliberate. Breyer heard me stirring, appeared in the bedroom doorway in her silk robe. "Vernon, what's wrong?" "Just tight chest," I managed. "Probably nothing." "Oh, God." She rushed forward with flawless panic. "Where's your medication? Did you take yesterday's dose?" "Oh, no, that's why you're having symptoms." She grabbed the bottle from her nightstand, a different bottle I noticed. "Here, take 2 now." The pain intensified. Real pain. My left arm tingled. "Should we call an ambulance?" She asked, phone already in hand. "No," I said. "Just need a minute." "You're being stubborn." She pressed the pills toward me. "Take these. Dr. Sanchez said missing doses could cause exactly this kind of episode." I looked at her face, the perfect concern, the careful urgency. The woman who'd said, "I actually commit to the plan." "Breyer," I said quietly, "what's really in those pills?" Her expression didn't change, but her hand did steadied when it should have trembled. "Your heart medication," she said. "What else would it be?" The tightness in my chest began to ease. Not a heart attack, I realized. Panic. Fear manifesting physically. "I'm calling Clifford," I said, "and Sterling, and maybe Walter Garrison at the FBI." Her mask finally cracked. "Vernon, get out of my bedroom." She stood there for 3 seconds, then smiled a different smile, colder. "You don't have proof of anything," she said softly. "And Conrad will swear whatever I tell him to swear. We both know how this ends." She left. I heard her making a phone call from the hallway. My phone buzzed. Text from Clifford. "Lab results Monday, but preliminary field test shows midazolam in those pills, not heart medication. Sedative. Same drug found in 4 suspicious deaths in 3 states. Get out of that house now." I was pulling on clothes when I heard Breyer's voice again, carrying through the ventilation system from the kitchen below. "A change of plans," she was saying. "We move tomorrow, tonight if I can arrange it. Yes, I'm sure, because he knows. And if he talks to the FBI before we file those competency papers, we lose everything." Outside my window, the first snow of December began to fall. My daughter stood in the doorway looking 38 and holding a sheriff's warning I never wanted her to need. The snow had stopped falling an hour after I'd heard Breyer's voice through the ventilation system. I'd packed a bag called Sterling Prescott and was walking to my truck when headlights cut through the December darkness. The rental sedan parked beside the fence, and Celeste emerged taller than I remembered her mother's cheekbones, 8 years of California architecture work in her confident stride. Wait, one word, 8 years compressed into 2 syllables. "Clifford called you," I said. "Yesterday morning. She crossed the distance between us. Told me your wife is trying to kill you, and my uncle is helping. I was on a plane 4 hours later. She'd left in March 2015, 3 weeks after her mother's diagnosis. Said things during that last argument I'd replayed 10,000 times. The worst, you never loved her enough, Dad. You were always too busy being the hero lawyer to just be her husband. I'd let her go, thought time would soften it. Instead, time had just made the silence longer. You shouldn't have come, I said. It's dangerous. Clifford said you were staying in the house. She picked up my bag. That's the dangerous part. You're coming home with me. Hotel in town. Sterling's meeting us there. Breyer. Can't kill you if you're not here. She started walking toward the house. I need 5 minutes inside. There's something Clifford said you'd want to show me. Inside the study, I pulled the leather folder from the safe, set it on the desk between us. Clifford told me Breyer's trying to take everything, Celeste said. The ranch, the trust, all of it. Let me show you what everything actually is. I opened the folder. The documents were ordered chronologically trust. Establishment, asset transfers, foundation charter. Celeste read the first page, then looked up. November 2021, she said slowly. 2 years ago. 2 months after Breyer and I married. She turned pages. Read aloud, Irrevocable Beneficiary, the Martha Caldwell Foundation. Transfer date November 8th, 2021. Assets conveyed Caldwell Ranch real property mineral rights, investment portfolio, business holdings. She looked up. You gave away everything. Not gave away, protected. The foundation supports ovarian cancer research at MD Anderson. Your mother's legacy doing the work she'd have done if she'd had time. Celeste kept reading. Her finger stopped on a line. Trustee authority Celeste Marie Caldwell with succession provisions. Her voice cracked. I'm the trustee. You've been the trustee since the day I signed it. The paperwork's been in California waiting for you at a law office in Santa Monica. They've sent 3 certified letters. I moved offices last year. She sat down hard. Dad, does Breyer know? No, and neither does Conrad. Their Delaware LLC holds power of attorney over accounts I closed 2 years ago. They've been chasing shadows. The power of attorney's worthless, she said, understanding spreading across her face. They can't touch any of this. Not a dollar. She flipped to the last page, stopped. Read the foundation's mission statement words I'd drafted alone at this desk, while Breyer slept upstairs not knowing the man she'd married, had learned from 30 years of courtroom strategy that the best defense is built before the attack begins. 6 months, Celeste said quietly. Clifford told me they've been planning this for 6 months, and the whole time there was nothing to steal. You know what checkmate looks like. It's watching your enemy realize they were never playing the game. You were. We drove to the hotel. Sterling met us there with Clifford. They'd coordinated the midazolam test results with an FBI field agent in Houston. Walter Garrison had authorized a quiet preliminary investigation. The pills from my desk contained enough sedative to render me incompetent for a competency hearing. Not enough to kill, just enough to make me confused, disoriented, unable to defend myself in court. Smart, Sterling said grimly, and calculated. She's done this before. It's 4 times, Clifford added. Brooklyn, Phoenix, Portland, and a case in Nevada still under review. FBI's building a pattern. Celeste listened to all of it, the 312 phone calls between Breyer and Conrad, before she'd ever met me. The Delaware LLC, the fake heart medication, the competency hearing strategy. When they finished, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. Why didn't you tell me 2 years ago, when you set up the foundation? Sterling and Clifford left us alone. We sat on the hotel balcony. December the 16th morning, sunrise turning the plains gold, 2 cups of coffee between us. 8 years ago, you said I didn't love your mother enough, I said finally. That I was too busy being the hero lawyer to just be her husband. I was afraid if I told you about the foundation, you'd think I was buying back lost love. Wanted you to come home on your own when you were ready. Celeste's coffee cup shook. She set it down. I was 30 years old, she said, crying now. Mom had just been diagnosed and I was so angry at the universe I took it out on you. I said that because I hadn't grown up yet. I'm so sorry, Dad. I reached across, held her hand. I loved your mother from the day I met her until the day she died, I said. And every day since. The foundation isn't buying anything back. It's just making sure her fight continues. She'd have loved this, Celeste whispered. All of it. The research, the legacy, the way you protected it before anyone knew it, needed protecting. We sat there as the sun climbed higher. 20 minutes, not a word. Just 2 people learning that silence can heal what 8 years of distance broke. Finally, Celeste spoke. What happens now? Now? I looked at the folder in my lap, the irrevocable trust that meant Breyer and Conrad had spent 6 months chasing legal control over assets that no longer existed in my name. Their Delaware LLC power of attorney was worthless. But I still had the poison pill in my desk drawer locked in Clifford's evidence bag. An attempted murder doesn't disappear just because the money does. Now we decide, I said, whether to expose them or let them destroy themselves. Celeste leaned back, watched the ranch land stretch toward the horizon. Mom always said you were the most patient man she'd ever met, she said, that you could wait out any opponent. Your mother was right about most things. So we wait. I thought about Breyer's voice through the heating vent, the cold calculation, the way she'd threatened Conrad, manipulated doctors, faked devotion while planning murder. We wait, I said, but not long, because poison doesn't care about patience and your uncle's phone started ringing again 3 hours ago. My daughter found the file I missed in 40 seconds and it changed everything we thought we knew about survival odds. Conrad's phone had stopped ringing by Monday afternoon. That silence worried me more than the calls. Celeste sat at my study desk with the laptop I'd used to photograph Breyer's cloud files, her architect's precision turning chaos into grid patterns. Hey, Dad, when you searched her cloud files, did you check nested folders? It says. What nested? She opened a directory I'd photographed but never explored. Phoenix_Reno_old. 8 files inside. These are news articles, she said, clicking the first one. Phoenix, March 2015. Scottsdale Resort, owner dead in apparent suicide. She scrolled. Harold Brennan, 67, found in garage 3 weeks after contested asset seizure. Wife, formerly Diane Mitchell, filed fraud claims against family trust. Authorities ruled death self-inflicted. My hands went cold. There's another one. Celeste opened the second file. Reno, November 2019. Casino owner dies in kitchen fire. This one's Lawrence Kimball, 71. House fire 3 days after preliminary asset seizure hearing. Wife, formerly Sarah Brennan, testified her husband had been despondent over business losses. Fire ruled accidental due to unattended stove. Sarah Brennan, I said slowly. Phoenix victim's widow became Reno victim's wife. As same woman dad, look at the photos. She pulled up 2 archived wedding announcements. Different hair color, different makeup, same bone structure, same cold eyes. That's Breyer, I said. Celeste kept clicking. Bank records, legal filings, a pattern emerging with surgical precision. Phoenix married June 2014, asset seizure, February 2015, suicide, March 2015. Total, take $2.8 million. She moved to the next file. Reno married August 2018 asset seizure, October 2019 fire, November 2019. Total, take $1.7 million. And Texas, I said quietly. Married October to 2021. Today is December 16th, 2023. We're right on schedule. Celeste's face had gone pale. Dad, she's killed 2 people before. Both of them are dead. I called Clifford. Get someone here, I said when he answered. Someone who understands what we're looking at. Already did, he replied. After you showed me those initial files last week, I reached out to a PI in Phoenix, woman who's been hunting your wife for 8 years. She'll be at my office Wednesday morning. 2 men, 2 asset seizures, 2 deaths ruled accidental. Nothing about Briar Whitfield was accidental. Wednesday, December 18th, Brewster County Sheriff's Office at 11. The woman waiting in Clifford's conference room was 50 Phoenix Sun, worn with the kind of steady eyes that came from watching people lie for a living. She stood when we entered, shook my hand with a grip that meant business. Denise Frost, she said. Private investigator Phoenix. I've been tracking Rebecca Hoyt for 8 years across 3 states, and your wife, Mr. Caldwell, is her. She laid a dossier on the table. Thick, professional. The kind of documentation that ended in courtrooms. Real name, Rebecca Ann Hoyt. Born Tucson, 1989. Dropped out of Arizona State junior year, 2010. First marriage, Phoenix lawyer, 2012. Divorced 18 months later with a $250,000 settlement. That's when the pattern started. Denise opened the file. Photographs, timelines, witness statements. It's Phoenix 2015. Harold Brennan, 67, owned 3 resort properties in Scottsdale. She married him as Diane Mitchell. Spent 8 months establishing medical power of attorney financial controls. Witness testimony about his declining mental state. Filed asset seizure through a Delaware shell company. Sound familiar. Iao disipon or sixet spregendorin. Very, I said. Harold fought back. Had lawyers' family support evidence. She lost the first hearing. 3 weeks later, he was dead in his garage. Carbon monoxide. No note, no warning, but plenty of testimony from his loving wife about how despondent he'd been. Police bought it, Celeste asked. Police had no reason not to, until the family hired me 6 months later. By then, Diane Mitchell had vanished with $2.8 million. Denise flipped pages. Reno, 2019. Lawrence Kimball, 71 casino owner. Same pattern. She used the name Sarah Brennan, took it from her previous victim. Married him, established control-filed seizure claims. Lawrence fought harder than Harold. Had security investigators locked files. She was losing in court. And then I knew the answer. Kitchen fire, November 2019. House burned with Lawrence inside. Fire marshal ruled it accidental unattended stove gas leak, unfortunate timing. Sarah Brennan collected $1.7 million in life insurance and seized property. But you didn't buy it, Clifford said. I was already tracking her by then. Phoenix family had hired me, and I'd connected the dots to Reno, but I was 3 days too late. Denise pulled out a photograph. Briar at a courthouse, different hair, same calculating smile. She disappeared after Reno, went quiet for 2 years. I kept searching. Then last month a flag hit on one of my databases. Briar Whitfield, Texas, married October 2021 to Vernon Caldwell. I ran the photo. She looked at me. It was her. And when Sheriff Townsend called me last week about your situation, I knew she was running the same playbook. Phoenix and Reno both have open warrants, Clifford added. Fraud, elder abuse, suspected homicide. We've been coordinating quietly. FBI's interested too. Yeah, and I thought about the poison pills, the midazolam, the competency hearing strategy. She's already tried once, I said. The fake heart medication. How do we stop her before she tries again? We don't stop her, Denise said. We trap her, because this time she's not walking away. Some people spend 8 years chasing ghosts. Denise Frost spent 8 years building a cage. She spread surveillance equipment across the table. Audio devices, video cameras, digital trackers. Here's what Phoenix and Reno didn't have, she said. Advance warning, time to prepare. A victim who knows what's coming and can control the environment. You want me to go back to the ranch, I said. I want you to appear vulnerable while we document everything. Conversations, movements, transactions. Every piece builds the case. But you'll have protection me. Sheriff Townsend's deputy's FBI oversight. And something else the previous victims didn't have. What's that? Celeste asked. An irrevocable trust that means everything she's planned is worthless. When she realizes that, and she will, she's going to panic. Panicked predators make mistakes. Denise handed me a thick folder. 8 years of investigation, 2 dead men, 3 states worth of warrants and evidence. The question isn't whether to trap her, she said. It's how many people it takes to make sure she never walks away. Phoenix wants her. Reno wants her. FBI wants her. And after what she tried with those pills, Texas wants her too. I held the dossier, felt its weight. When do we start? You already did, Denise said. The moment you collected evidence instead of confronting her. The moment you protected assets she didn't know were gone. The moment you called Sheriff Townsend instead of handling this alone. She looked at Clifford, then at Celeste, then back at me. Now we finish it, together. 5 people around my study table meant the difference between justice and another funeral mine. Denise's dossier sat in the center like evidence at trial. Celeste had printed tactical maps. Clifford brought secure phones. And on the laptop screen, Sterling Prescott Mai, Houston oil and gas lawyer, for 20 years, 65 years old, with courtroom scars that made him invaluable in situations where legal precision meant survival, leaned forward from his office. FBI needs 48 hours to review my evidence for federal charges, Denise said. Mann Act violations, interstate fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. If they move fast, we have authority by Friday. December 22nd is Saturday, I said, the fake closing date, which you're going to appear to honor, Sterling said from the screen. I've coordinated with FBI supervision. You'll feign signing the Delaware LLC closing documents at my office. Cameras running, audio recording, full surveillance. When Breyer and Conrad show up expecting to finalize the asset seizure, they'll be documenting their own conspiracy. What about Conrad? Celeste asked. He's the weak link. That's the barn, Clifford said. We install cameras tonight. Vernon invites Conrad for a private conversation Friday morning. No lawyers, no Breyer, just 2 brothers. We let Conrad think he has a way out if he turns on her. Will he take it? Denise asked. He took my father's money in 1998 without telling me, I said. He spent 25 years carrying that guilt. Give him a choice between prison and confession, he'll break. Sterling nodded. 3-day timeline, FBI review finishes Thursday night, barn confrontation, Friday morning, fake closing, Saturday afternoon. Everything has to be tight or she runs. She's already planning to run, Denise said. Phoenix and Reno both showed escape preparation 2 weeks before closing dates. We need to watch for offshore transfers, travel bookings, identity documents. I'll handle that, came a voice from the doorway. Leora Bentley stood there, 26 Marthe's niece, the nurse who'd stayed with my first wife through the final months of hospice. She'd inherited her aunt's steady competence and quiet strength. Leora, I said, you shouldn't. Aunt Marta would want me here, she interrupted gently. And I'm trained in observation. Let me tail Breyer if she leaves the ranch. Mobile surveillance. She doesn't know my car, doesn't know my face well enough to recognize me in traffic. Denise studied her. You understand the risk if she sees you? That she killed 2 men and tried to kill Vernon, Leora said. I understand exactly what she is. Celeste looked at me. I nodded. Okay, Denise said. But you report every movement to me. No heroics. We spent 3 hours mapping it out. Communication protocols, evidence chains, contingency plans if Breyer accelerated her timeline. Sterling coordinated FBI agent assignments. Clifford arranged deputy backup. Denise confirmed her contacts in Phoenix and Reno were ready to move when federal charges landed. Building a trap for a serial killer is like defusing a bomb one wrong wire, and you're the casualty. By midnight, everyone had left except Celeste. Dad, she said quietly, what if she doesn't show up Saturday? What if she runs before we're ready? And then Denise and the FBI chase her like they've been chasing her for 8 years, I said. But this time, they have evidence warrants and a conspiracy charge that includes Conrad. She can run, but she can't hide from federal jurisdiction. And you, Celeste's voice cracked, if she figures it out early and comes after you, I'm 63 years old, spent 8 years as a JAG prosecutor. I know how to handle dangerous people. I touched her shoulder. And this time, I'm not alone. Your mother taught me that. Celeste left for the hotel. I stayed at the ranch, had to maintain appearances. Breyer came home Wednesday night, December 20th, with shopping bags and her practiced smile. How was town? I asked. Exhausting. Christmas shopping. She kissed my cheek. Listen, Conrad called. Needs me to check some ranch business paperwork in San Antonio. I'll be gone 2 days, Thursday and Friday. San Antonio. I kept my voice neutral. What kind of paperwork? Something about mineral rights transfers, legal documentation. She waved it away. Boring stuff, but he's nervous about the LLC closing Saturday. Wants everything perfect. 2 days is a long time for paperwork. You know Conrad, obsessive about details. She smiled. I'll be back Friday night. Plenty of time before Saturday's signing. I pulled her close, kissed her like a man who believed his wife. Drive safe, I said. She left Thursday morning. I watched her SUV disappear down the ranch road, then called Leora. She's moving, heading south toward Highway 10. I'm 3 cars back, Leora replied. Silver sedan, she hasn't noticed. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Vernon, Leora said, voice tight. She didn't go to San Antonio. She's in Austin, just parked outside an investment firm, Cayman Islands offshore licenses in the window. And stay on her, photographs if you can. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed with images. Breyer shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit. Breyer signing documents. Breyer accepting a folder marked with a Caribbean bank logo. I forwarded everything to Denise. Her response came fast. Phoenix and Reno both had escape routes set up 2 weeks out. She's following her script exactly. Austin firm specializes in Caribbean asset protection and identity documentation. She's not planning to be in the country when the closing falls apart. I called Clifford. She's preparing to abandon Conrad. Expected, he said. That's why we're moving Friday. She thinks she has 2 more days. We're closing the net early. San Antonio was northwest. She drove east to Austin. The lie was the tell. Friday morning, I texted Conrad. Need to talk. Barn 9 a.m. Just us. Important. His response took 3 minutes. About what? The father's letter. The $400,000. And the choice you're about to make. Another pause. Then, I'll be there. Denise sent final confirmation. Thursday night, FBI approved federal warrant package. Mann Act, interstate fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder facilitation. Agents standing by for Saturday closing. Phoenix and Reno warrants active. She's boxed. I looked at Leora's surveillance photos. Breyer's hand on the Cayman banker's shoulder. Her smile the same cold calculation she'd used in Phoenix and Reno, in my bedroom, when she'd offered me poison pills. She was preparing to vanish before the December 22nd closing, just like the pattern predicted. Leave Conrad holding the conspiracy, disappear into Caribbean offshore networks, wait 2 years, and start again with a new name and a new victim. But this time, she wasn't hunting an isolated widower who didn't know what was coming. This time, I was closing the net 3 days early. And when Conrad walked into that barn Friday morning, he'd have a choice: confession or prison. Either way, Breyer's pattern was breaking. I just had to survive until Saturday. My brother's voice on the wiretap had the sound of a man watching his partner board the lifeboat without him. Friday morning, December 21st. Clifford's office. The emergency wiretap warrant had come through at midnight. Federal judge in El Paso signed it based on Denise's interstate fraud evidence and the attempted poisoning. We sat in the surveillance room, listening to Conrad's phone ring for the 8th time in 2 hours. No answer. 9th call, 10th, each one going to voicemail. On the 11th attempt, Breyer finally picked up. Her voice came through cold clipped. What? Where are you? Conrad's panic was audible. You said San Antonio. Your location shows Austin. Why are you in Austin? You aren't answering me. You aren't leaving me, are you? Silence on the line. 3 seconds, 4. Conrad, Breyer said slowly, like explaining something to a child. I'm handling details. Offshore accounts take precision. Did you think we'd keep money in Texas banks where Vernon's lawyers could freeze them? You didn't tell me about Austin. You didn't... I don't tell you everything. That's why this works. This isn't working, Conrad said, voice breaking. Brent Mercer called yesterday. Said someone's been asking questions about Phoenix, about Delaware LLCs, about... Mercer panics for a living. Ignore him. I can't ignore this. If Vernon finds out... Vernon's not finding out anything. Listen to me carefully. Her voice went hard. Don't panic. Be ready for the closing meeting in the ranch barn on the 22nd, tomorrow. Your brother will be there. I'll be there. Mercer will be there. We sign the papers, file the LLC transfer, and this is done. Finished. You get your $3 million, I get mine, and we never speak again. Never speak, what does that mean? It means exactly what I said. This is a business arrangement, Conrad. When it's done, it's done. She hung up. Conrad tried calling back twice. Both went to voicemail. Clifford looked at me. She's already abandoned him. He just doesn't know it yet. He knows, I said quietly. He's just hoping he's wrong. You can hear betrayal coming. It sounds like 11 unanswered phone calls in 3 hours. Saturday morning, December 22nd. The barn meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. I was checking the camera placements Clifford's team had installed when Miguel found me in the stables. "Patron," he said, "need to talk, private." Miguel Ramirez had been my ranch foreman for 25 years, 55 years old, raised 6 kids, talked every spring about saving for his youngest daughter's college fund. Steady hands, honest eyes, the kind of man you trusted with your land and your livestock, because he'd never given you reason not to. He led me into an empty stall, shut the door, turned to face me with tears already streaming. "I'm not as good as you think," he said. My stomach tightened. "6 months ago, your brother came to me, offered me $50,000 if I installed reverse surveillance cameras to track your movements. Where you went, who you met with, what you did when Miss Breyer wasn't around." I said nothing, let him finish. "I took the money." Miguel's voice cracked. "I took it, Patron. Installed the cameras like he asked. 6 of them. Barn, study, window, garage, stable, office. I told myself I needed it for Maria's college. Told myself it wasn't really betrayal if I was just watching, not hurting." He pulled a canvas bag from behind a feed barrel, set it on the ground between us. But I never gave him a single second of video, not one frame. I kept the money in my locker untouched, waiting for this day. Knew it would come. Knew I'd have to choose. He opened the bag. Bundles of cash. A hard drive labeled with 6 months of dates. "Here, $50,000 and 6 months of footage he never saw. I'm so sorry. If you want me gone..." "Stop." I looked at the bag, at Miguel's face, at 25 years of mornings starting before dawn, of trust built in the small actions that make a ranch run. "That Conrad gave you $50,000. "Yes, Patron." "And you installed the cameras." "Yes." "But never gave him the footage." "Never, not 1 second." I pushed the bag back toward him with my boot. "You keep it. Use it for Maria's college fund you've talked about for 5 years. I know you're loyal." "But you took money from a desperate man who was trying to buy what he couldn't earn. That's not your sin. That's his." I put my hand on his shoulder. "But you have to stand with me the next 8 hours. Closing meeting happens in this barn at 2 p.m. Conrad will be there. Breyer will be there, their lawyer. FBI agents will be watching everything. Are you ready?" Miguel wiped his eyes, nodded. "I'm ready." "Good, because I need you to understand something." I squeezed his shoulder. "A 25-year friendship isn't bought for $50,000, only tested for $50,000, and you just passed. 25 years of friendship, tested for $50,000, proven in 8 seconds of decision." Miguel tried to speak, couldn't. We stood there in the stable, 2 men who had worked this land together long enough to know that loyalty isn't about never being tempted. It's about what you do when temptation offers you exactly what you need. He pulled me into a brief, hard embrace. Cowboy protocol, 3 seconds pat, on the back step away before emotion became uncomfortable. "The cameras," he said quietly, "they're still active, and the footage all 6 months, it shows Conrad coming to me, making the offer, checking in every week, asking for video. It's all there. You recorded his visits. Everyone. Figured if this day came, you'd want proof." He picked up the hard drive. "This is evidence, yes." "Yes," I said. "That's evidence." Miguel handed it to me. "Then use it. Whatever you need to do to protect this ranch, you do it. I'm with you." I looked at the hard drive. 6 months of Conrad's desperation documented by the man he'd tried to turn against me. 6 months of bribes and check-ins and increasingly frantic requests for surveillance that never came. At 2 p.m., Conrad would walk into that barn expecting an ally in Miguel, expecting the foreman he'd paid to be his eyes and ears. Instead, he'd face a unified front that included the man he'd tried to buy. I held Miguel's shoulder one more time. "Take 8 hours," I said. "Then this is over." 8 hours, he agreed. We walked out of the stables together. The December sun was high. The barn doors were open. Clifford's cameras were running. And somewhere in Austin, Breyer was packing for a closing meeting that would end very differently than she'd planned. I signed the papers that would steal everything I owned and asked my wife which moment in the 26 months since we'd married she'd actually love me. 2 p.m. December 22nd. 8 hours after Miguel's confession. Breyer entered my study wearing silk and turquoise jewelry. She carried the Delaware LLC closing papers in a leather portfolio. "Here they are, baby." She set them on my desk. "Final signatures. Then everything's protected. Conrad's coordinating with Brent Mercer in the barn at 4. I picked up my pen with a hand I let shake slightly, the forgetful old man routine. Where do I sign? She pointed to 3 places. I signed all 3 Vernon Caldwell in my clearest handwriting, steady enough to be legal, shaky enough to sell the performance. Thank you, baby. She kissed me. I love you. I love you too. I set down the pen. Which moment in our 26 months was the one where you actually loved me? She froze, half a second, eyes flickering calculation. Then recovered, smiled. Every moment, baby. Every single one. Good. I stood, kissed her forehead. Go meet my brother in the barn at 4 p.m. I'll be out shortly. Don't be too long. She left. I watched through the window as she walked toward the barn, the woman who'd planned my competency hearing while researching Cayman offshore accounts. The woman who'd called my brother 18 months before we'd ever met. 4 p.m. I stood on the ranch porch surveying positions. Miguel's voice crackled through the radio earpiece. Barn cameras live, Patron. All 6 angles recording. Doors fixed if you need fast exit. Yes, copy. Clifford next. 3 deputies with me, 200 yards West Hill. We see the barn door. Signal if you need us. Roger. Denise Frost. 2 FBI agents with me in the van back pasture. Federal warrants active. Your word, we move. Understood. Dark clouds rolled across the plains. High winds. First lightning crack split the sky to the north. I adjusted my cowboy hat. Felt the recording device in my shirt pocket. Felt the weight of 8 months of evidence, 26 months of marriage to a serial killer, 58 years of brotherhood about to end in a barn. Time to go to work, partners, I said into the radio. 3 voices confirmed. I walked toward the barn. Lightning announces itself before it strikes. So does justice if you're patient enough to watch the clouds gather. 4:25 p.m. The barn door creaked. 3 people waited inside. Breyer stood near the back wall. Conrad sat at the folding table. Papers spread in front of him. Brent Mercer, 47. Houston lawyer with expensive suit and cheaper ethics stood beside Conrad with a notary stamp. And there he is, Breyer said. We were starting to worry. Phone call ran long. I moved to the table. What's left to sign? Conrad pushed a sheet toward me. Final LLC transfer authorization. Your signature releases the trust assets to corporate structure. I looked at the paper, at my brother's shaking hand. Before I sign, I said slowly, why did you call my wife 47 times between April and now? The barn went silent. Lightning flashed through the wall slats. What? Conrad stammered. 47 calls. I checked phone records. And Breyer called you 18 months before she and I ever met. March 2021. You had 312 conversations before she walked into that Austin fundraiser where I accidentally met her. Breyer's arms uncrossed. Vernon, your real name is Rebecca Hoyt, I continued. Phoenix 2015, Harold Brennan, 67 resort owner. Asset seizure, garage, suicide. Reno, 2019, Lawrence Kimball, 71 casino owner. Asset seizure, kitchen fire. Conrad's face went pale. How do you... 2 people dead. Same pattern. Delaware LLC competency claims offshore escape accounts. I looked at Breyer. Except this time, you brought a partner. My brother. The man who needed money since 1998 when our father saved him from bankruptcy. 47 calls, 18 months before they met. 2 dead men, 1 shaking gun. Conrad stood, reached into his jacket. When his hand came out, it held a pistol, small caliber, the kind you buy for protection and pray you never use. His hand shook so badly I could see the barrel trembling. You know too much, brother, he said. Brent Mercer backed away, hands up. I'm just the notary. Shut up, Conrad snapped, gun still pointed at me. Vernon, you weren't supposed to figure this out. You were supposed to sign the papers, have the episode Breyer planned, and die, I finished. Like Harold, like Lawrence. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Tears streamed down his face. I just needed the money. Father left you everything, the ranch, the trust, the legacy. I got nothing. Bankruptcy in 98, failure in 2008, always your younger brother who couldn't measure up. So you partnered with a serial killer. I partnered with someone who could fix it, he sobbed. Someone who had a plan, who knew how to... He stopped, gun shaking harder. Breyer moved toward the side door. Quiet, calculated. Don't move, Rebecca, I said without looking at her. FBI's outside. You run, you don't make it 50 yards. She froze. Conrad's gun barrel wavered between me and her, and some invisible point where his conscience was screaming. Conrad, I said quietly, put down the gun. I can't. If I do, I go to prison. If I don't, he sobbed. I don't want to shoot you. You're my brother. Then don't. But she said, Breyer said, way she's going to prison in Phoenix and Reno for homicide. I said, you can go with her, or you can put down the gun and tell the FBI everything. Your choice. Lightning cracked directly overhead. Thunder shook the barn. Conrad's hand shook. Gun pointed at my chest. The weapon trembled in the lightning flashes through the barn slats. When guns shake, the man holding them is waiting for someone to save him from the situation, from himself, from the choice he doesn't want to make. I stood still, brother, pointing a weapon at me, and waited to see who would save Conrad first. I pointed to the barn ceiling and watched my brother's conspiracy die in the space between his eyes and the cameras he'd never seen. Those cameras Miguel installed, I said. 6 months of footage, every conversation, every bribe attempt, every moment you thought you were buying his loyalty. Conrad's gun hand dropped slightly. His eyes went to the ceiling, 6 small lenses mounted in the rafters, LED lights blinking red. No, he whispered. Breyer's face drained of color. She took a step back. And you're talking to 5 FBI microphones right now? I continued, recording every word. Phoenix wants you for Harold Brennan's murder. Reno wants you for Lawrence Kimball. Texas wants you for attempted poisoning and conspiracy to commit fraud. You're bluffing, Breyer said, but her voice had lost its warmth. Cold calculation now. Survival mode. Am I? I pulled a small recorder from my pocket. Hit play. Her own voice filled the barn. I've been doing this since I was 22. Brooklyn Phoenix, that tech executive in Portland, they all thought they were careful too. The difference is, I actually commit to the plan. From the wiretap. The conversation Conrad had overheard through the heating vent. Breyer's jaw tightened. Here's the interesting part, I said. Phoenix P.I. Denise Frost met you in Austin last week, not for Cayman accounts, for an immunity deal. Phoenix and Reno, murders she offered you full immunity if you flipped on my brother. Conrad's gun lowered completely. He stared at Breyer. You agreed 4 days ago, I continued. December 18th, signed a cooperation agreement. Federal witness protection in exchange for testimony against Conrad Caldwell as your co-conspirator and primary accomplice in a multi-state fraud and murder scheme. At that's Breyer started. True, I finished. Every word. You sold him before you even came back to the ranch Friday. The Cayman account's empty. You transferred everything to a separate offshore structure with only your name. Conrad was never getting $3 million. He was getting a cell. Conrad's face went white. The gun trembled. Beer, he said quietly. Tell him he's lying. She didn't. Breyer, his voice broke. Tell him. She looked at Conrad with the same cold eyes she'd used on Harold Brennan, on Lawrence Kimball, on every man who'd believed her performance. I do what I have to do to survive, she said flatly. You were always the backup plan, Conrad. Insurance at Vernon proved harder to kill than the others. You want to know what betrayal looks like? Watch a man realize his partner sold him 4 days before he pulled a gun for her. Conrad's hand went limp. The pistol clattered to the barn floor. The doors swung open. Clifford Townsend entered first service weapon drawn. 3 FBI agents behind him, 2 men, 1 woman, all in tactical vests with federal insignia. Hands up, both of you, Clifford said. You're under arrest. Breyer raised her hands slowly. Calculated. Already planning her next move. Conrad just stood there staring at nothing. Denise Frost entered last, holding a folder. She walked directly to Breyer. Rebecca Ann Hoyt, she said formally. FBI has warrants from Arizona and Nevada for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Breyer smiled, actually smiled. I have immunity, she said. Check your files. December 18th, Phoenix Field Office. I'm a federal witness. For Phoenix and Reno, Denise agreed. Not for Texas. Attempted murder of Vernon Caldwell, conspiracy to commit fraud and violation of the Mann Act fall outside your immunity agreement. You're going to jail, Rebecca. The only question is which state gets you first. The smile vanished. 2 agents moved forward with handcuffs. Breyer didn't resist, professional to the end. Conrad watched them cuff her, watched them lead her past him toward the door. She didn't look at him. didn't acknowledge 30 years of planning, 6 months of conspiracy, or the brother she'd convinced to betray everything for money that had never existed. Another agent cuffed Conrad. He didn't resist either, just stood there crying silently as they read him his rights. "Vernon," Clifford said quietly. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, "I'm okay." But I wasn't sure that was true. 5:30 p.m. Ranch Yard. Rain had started heavy cold, the kind of December storm that turns dirt to mud. Conrad sat handcuffed in the back of a sheriff's cruiser. Breyer was already gone, loaded into an FBI van heading for El Paso processing. 2 agents were photographing the barn. Another was collecting the gun Conrad had dropped. Celeste stood beside me on the porch, watching officers move through the rain. She'd been inside the house during the barn confrontation, maintaining the facade of ignorance. Now, she just held my arm. "Dad," she said softly, "it's over." "Not yet." I walked across the yard toward the cruiser. Rain soaked through my shirt in seconds. Conrad looked up when I opened the door. His face was destroyed tears mud rain, all of it mixing into something broken. "Brother," he said, voice barely audible. "Did Dad really save me in '98? I nodded. $400,000, July 1998, bankruptcy court in Houston. He paid it quietly, told the judge to seal the records, and never mentioned it to you. As it was, because he was afraid you'd feel weak. Afraid you'd think he was buying your love or proving you couldn't succeed on your own. He wanted you to believe you'd recovered through your own strength." Conrad's face crumpled. He slid forward off the seat knees, hitting mud-handcuffed hands behind his back. He sobbed loud, wrenching sounds that carried across the yard. 2 deputies moved to help him up. I waved them back. My brother didn't cry for the $11 million or the 30 years of conspiracy. He cried in the mud for our father's love he'd never known about. Celeste came to my side, put her hand on my shoulder. "Let them take him," she said gently. I nodded. The deputies lifted Conrad, carefully guided him back into the cruiser. He kept crying as they closed the door, kept crying as the car pulled away through the rain. I stood there watching taillights disappear. "Dad," Celeste said, "Grandpa was trying to protect Uncle Conrad." "I know," I said. "But he was wrong. Secrets don't protect people. They starve them of the love that could have saved them decades earlier." The rain intensified. Lightning cracked overhead. And I realized my father's greatest mistake wasn't the money he'd spent or the truth he'd hidden. It was believing that love had to be earned instead of given. My daughter held me in the December rain for the first time in 8 years, and neither of us said a word. 6 p.m., the ranch porch. Conrad's taillights had disappeared into the storm 20 minutes ago. The FBI van with Breyer had been gone longer. Clifford and Denise had left after taking final statements, promising to coordinate with Phoenix and Reno prosecutors. Now it was just family. Celeste stepped forward from the porch overhang into the rain, wrapped her arms around me without speaking. Her shoulders shook, crying again, but different this time. Not grief, release. I held her. Let the rain soak us both. Let 8 years of distance dissolve in water and silence. Miguel and Maria stood near the barn entrance, giving us space. Maria, 60 years old. Miguel's wife, the ranch housekeeper who'd worked alongside her husband for decades, keeping this place running, wiped her eyes with her apron. She'd known Mart, had been there through the hospice months, had watched our family fracture, and was now watching it begin to heal. Finally, Celeste pulled back. Rain dripped from her hair. "Dad," she said quietly, "did Mom know about the foundation?" I nodded. "She suggested it, 3 weeks before she passed. We were sitting in the hospice room. You'd gone back to California the day before. She was lucid that morning, sharp, like the cancer had given her one last clear window." "What did she say?" I could still hear Marta's voice, weak but certain. She said, "Turn pain into road for someone else. Don't let this disease win by making you bitter. Make it lose by helping the next family who walks this path." Nasur. Celeste's face crumpled. Second time she'd cried today. First was in the hotel when we'd talked about the 8-year rift. This was different. This was her mother's voice reaching across 6 years to give her daughter permission to come home. "I blamed you," she whispered. "For 8 years I blamed you for not loving her enough. But she was teaching you how to love her even after she was gone." "She was teaching us both," I said. Celeste looked at the ranch, the barn where Conrad had pulled a gun, the study where I'd signed papers that meant nothing, the land that had nearly been stolen by conspiracy. "And Dad," she said, "I want to come home. I want to work for the foundation, with you, help run it, make sure Mom's legacy does exactly what she wanted." I pulled her close again. The foundation needs a CEO, someone who understands structure and planning and how to turn money into impact. Someone who cares about the mission more than the salary. I'm an architect, she said. I build things. Let me build this. Then come home. Some people spend 8 years running from grief. Others spend 8 years learning. Grief can be transformed into someone else's hope. Miguel and Maria approached slowly. Maria carried towels. Patron, Miguel said. The barn cameras are dismantled. FBI took the hard drives. House is secure. You should rest. Thank you, Miguel. Both of you. I looked at Maria. For everything. For staying. For keeping this place running while I was fighting battles I didn't know were coming. Maria handed us towels. This is family, Mr. Caldwell. Family stays. Celeste squeezed my hand. I'm going to the hotel. Pack, check out. I'll be back tomorrow to start planning the foundation transition. January 1st, I said. Trust activates in 9 days. Then we have work to do. She kissed my cheek and left. I watched her rental car navigate the muddy ranch road until the taillights disappeared. Miguel and Maria headed to their cottage on the south pasture. The house went quiet. 11 p.m., my study. I'd avoided this room since the arrests. Too many ghosts. Conrad sitting across from me, asking about trust documents. Breyer bringing me coffee laced with concern and poison. My father's letter still locked in the safe. But tonight, I needed to be here. I opened the Marth Foundation folder for the first time since the ordeal ended. The leather portfolio Sterling Prescott had prepared. Official documents, trust structure, mission statement. I read aloud to the empty room. Annual budget supports scholarships and medical costs for 200-plus children diagnosed with ovarian and related cancers. Trust activation, January 1st. Renewable funding structure ensures perpetual operation. 200 children every year. Families who wouldn't have to choose between treatment and bankruptcy. Kids who'd get college scholarships even if their mothers didn't survive to see graduation. Marta's pain turned into someone else's road. I pulled out a blank sheet of foundation letterhead, uncapped my pen, wrote in the neat script my JAG training had drilled into me 30 years ago. Effective January 1st, 2024. Celeste Marie Caldwell is designated Chief Executive Officer of the Martha Caldwell Foundation. All operational authority, fiduciary responsibility, and strategic planning transfers to her oversight. Founder remains Chairman Emeritus in advisory capacity. I signed it, dated it, placed it in the folder. The succession plan was complete. The conspiracy had failed. The irrevocable trust that Breyer and Conrad had spent 6 months trying to steal would activate in 9 days untouched, exactly as Martin and I had designed it. I closed the folder, looked at the shelf behind my desk. Marthe's photo sat there taken during our 20th anniversary, 5 years before the cancer diagnosis. She was laughing, wind in her hair. The ranch spread out behind her. I picked up the frame, studied her face. I had to lose a wife and a brother to keep you alive, I said quietly. But it worked. The 11 million is safe. Celeste's coming home, and you're going to live 50 more years through children who never met you. Martha died in 2017. 7 years of grief, 2 years of planning, 6 months of fighting a conspiracy designed to erase her legacy. Tonight she became immortal through 200 children every year who would never know her name but would carry her gift forward. I set the photo back on the shelf, turned off the study light. Outside, the rain had stopped. Stars were breaking through the clouds, the kind of clear December night that made Texas plains look infinite. January 1st was 9 days away. I'd lost a wife to cancer and a brother to betrayal, but Marta's foundation would outlive us all. And that I realized was what victory looked like when you fought for something bigger than revenge. The jury of 12 took 40 minutes to decide my brother deserved 25 years and my wife deserved 12. March 2024, Llano County Courthouse. Sparse courtroom with fluorescent lights and wooden benches worn smooth by decades of justice. 9 days had passed since the foundation launched on January 1st. 3 months since the December barn confrontation. 90 days of depositions, evidence review, and legal maneuvering that ended here sentencing day. Breyer sat at the prosecution table. Her cooperation agreement meant she testified against Conrad in exchange for reduced charges. No life sentence for the Phoenix and Reno murders. Just 12 years for conspiracy and fraud in Texas. She took the stand in an orange jumpsuit. No silk, no jewelry, no performance. I met Conrad Caldwell 18 months before I married Vernon, she said flatly. March 2021. He contacted me through a financial planning forum, said his brother had recently remarried after his first wife's death and was vulnerable. We planned the Delaware LLSE scheme together. The prosecutor walked her through Phoenix 2015, Harold Brennan, the resort owner, asset seizure, garage suicide. Then Reno 2019, Lawrence Kimball, casino owner, kitchen fire. Then Texas, Vernon Caldwell, ranch owner, attempted poisoning, irrevocable trust they'd spent 6 months trying to steal without realizing it was already gone. I testified for a reduced sentence, she concluded. Federal cooperation agreement. Phoenix and Reno want me for murder conspiracy. I gave them Conrad. Conrad sat at the defense table 20 feet away. His public defender had advised a plea deal 15 years. Conrad refused, wanted a trial, wanted to argue he'd been manipulated. The jury hadn't believed him. The judge read the verdict. Federal charges: conspiracy to commit murder, interstate fraud, wire fraud, elder abuse. Conrad James Caldwell, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. Conrad's shoulders collapsed. He didn't look at me. The judge turned to Breyer. Rebecca Ann Hoyt, in consideration of your cooperation agreement and testimony, you are sentenced to 12 years in federal prison with credit for cooperation. You will serve a minimum of 8 years before parole eligibility. Breyer nodded. She'd won. Even now she'd negotiated survival. Celeste sat beside me in the gallery. She squeezed my hand. Dad, she whispered, you don't have to say anything. I squeezed back. I won't. Clifford sat behind us, Denise Frost beside him, Sterling Prescott in the front row. They had all testified during the trial: surveillance evidence, wiretap recordings, Miguel's camera footage, the midazolam pill analysis. One more witness had provided crucial testimony. Pastor Howard Lancaster, 67 years old, the minister Conrad had confessed to 3 weeks before the barn confrontation. Lancaster had wrestled with confession privilege for days before providing an affidavit waiving it. His testimony about Conrad's guilt-ridden admission had sealed the case. The bailiff led Conrad out first, shackled, orange jumpsuit matching Breyer's. He looked at me as he passed, mouthed 2 words, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Breyer walked past next. Didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone, just walked. 25 years, 12 years, 37 years of prison between a brother and a stranger who'd been my wife for 29 months. The courtroom emptied. Celeste and I stayed seated. It's over, she said quietly. Not yet, I replied. 3 months earlier, January 1st, 2024. The Martha Caldwell Foundation launch. Houston event venue. 50-plus reporters, medical researchers from MD Anderson, ovarian cancer advocacy groups, and Celeste, 38 years old, standing on stage as the foundation's first CEO, introducing the mission her mother had dreamed of 6 years ago. I'd given a 3-minute speech, short, precise, the way Marta would have wanted. My wife Marta died of ovarian cancer in 2017, I said into the microphone. She fought for 2 years. Near the end, she told me something I've carried every day since. She said, turn pain into road for someone else. This foundation is that road. I explained the structure. $11 million in perpetual endowment. Annual scholarships and medical cost assistance for 200 children diagnosed with ovarian and related cancers. Renewable funding, ensuring the program would outlive everyone in the room. Martha didn't get to see her grandchildren, I said, but her legacy will help 200 families every year. That's her gift. That's her road. The applause had been loud, but I'd only heard Marta's voice from 2017, 3 weeks before hospice, when she'd first suggested turning her death into someone else's survival. March 2024, ranch office. 2 days after sentencing. Celeste brought me an envelope. Plain, no return address. Warden sent this, she said. Breyer wrote it but never mailed it. He thought you should see it. I opened it. Single sheet of prison stationery. Handwriting I recognized. Vernon, I'm sorry I used Marty to trick you. I studied her obituary, her photos, her cancer timeline. I weaponized her memory to make you trust me. I didn't deserve to use her name in my lies. I hope your foundation saves what I tried to destroy. I won't write again. Rebecca. I read it twice, looked at Celeste. She called Marta by name, I said quietly. In 29 months of marriage, she never once said her name out loud. Always your wife, or your late wife, or she, never Marta. What are you going to do with it? Celeste asked. I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, held the letter to the flame. You burn letters when words come too late, or when the person who matters already heard the truth from heaven. The paper blackened, curled, turned to ash. Dad, Celeste said. Marta already forgave me, I said. From above, the moment I signed those foundation papers 2 years ago. The moment I chose her legacy over my pride. She doesn't need Rebecca Hoyt's apology, neither do I. I watched the last corner of the letter disappear into flame. Some apologies arrive too late to matter. Some loves survive, even the people who tried to destroy them. Celeste stood beside me as the fire settled. The foundation funded its first 50 scholarships last week, she said. Applications from families in 12 states, kids fighting what Mom fought. We're changing lives, Dad. I looked at Marta's photo on the shelf. The same frame, the same smile. The woman who'd taught me that pain could be transformed if you were brave enough to let it. She knows, I said. Outside, March wind swept across the ranch. Spring coming, new season, new chapter. Conrad would serve 25 years in federal prison. Breyer would serve 12. The conspiracy was over. The foundation was alive. And Marta, 6 years gone, was more present now than she'd been the day she died. Because love doesn't end when the person leaves. It just finds new roads. Christmas came to the ranch a year after I'd almost lost it, and every person who'd saved it sat around my fire pit. December 25th, 2024, clear Texas sky, temperature dropping toward 30. Breyer's letter had burned in March. Conrad was serving year 1 of 25. The foundation had distributed scholarships to 50 families across 12 states, and my porch was full of people who'd fought beside me. Celeste brewed coffee in the kitchen. She had moved home permanently in April, converted the guest house into her office, and ran the foundation with careful planning. Miguel and Maria arrived first carrying foil-wrapped barbacoa. Maria set dishes on the table, while Miguel checked the fire pit mesquite wood, stacked precise. Leora came next with pecan pie, Martha's recipe. 26 years old, nursing full-time at the Llano Hospital, carrying her aunt's gentleness in everything she touched. Clifford pulled up in his truck, retired sheriff's badge still on his dashboard. He carried a bottle wrapped in cloth. 30 years old, he said, unwrapping Kentucky bourbon. Saved it for a day that mattered. This is that day. Sterling arrived by helicopter landing in the South Pasture. Howard Lancaster drove from town in his modest sedan, pastor's collar visible. And then my son. Hayes pulled into the ranch drive at 4 p.m. 35 years old, my son from Mart, working oil deals in the Permian Basin, the way his mother had taught him, careful, strategic, honest. He embraced Celeste, shook hands all around, then found me. Dad, he said, Permian Basin deal closed yesterday. Mom would be proud of how you kept everything she built. I pulled him close. She'd be proud of you for building more. 9 people gathered around the fire pit. Howard gave the blessing. Lord, he said, hands open, we thank you for bringing this family through fire and returning them to fellowship. Bless this food and these souls. Amen. We ate barbacoa and talked about the year. Celeste described foundation applications. 217 families helped 3 research grants funded at MD Anderson. Hayes talked about oil prices and Permian production. Miguel mentioned the new fence line. Maria asked about everyone's health. Clifford poured whiskey into 9 glasses. We raised them without toast. Some moments don't need words. The sun touched the horizon. I stood. Wait here, I said. I walked to my study, pulled open the filing cabinet drawer I'd locked a year ago, retrieved the stack of papers I'd kept as evidence but no longer needed. Waiver forms, power of attorney, Delaware LLC closing documents, Breyer's letters, all of it the paper trail of a conspiracy that had nearly stolen my life. I carried the stack back to the fire pit. Everyone watched. Waiver, I said, feeding the first sheet to flames. Power of attorney, another sheet. Delaware closing documents, a thick bundle. Her letters, all of it lies. Watch it burn. The fire consumed them quickly. Paper curled black, turned to ash, rose into December sky. Miguel spoke quietly. Patron, some paper deserves fire more than filing cabinets. Celeste touched my shoulder as the flames rose. It's over, Dad. Really over. Paper burns faster than memory. The fraud documents disappeared in minutes, but the lessons would last the rest of my life. The gathering continued until dark. Stories, laughter. Leora's pecan pie served with Maria's coffee. Clifford's bourbon passed around again. Hayes and Celeste comparing business strategies. Howard talking quietly with Sterling about legal ethics and forgiveness. Family, not all by blood, but all by choice. One by one they left. Promises to gather at New Year's, Celeste to her guest house, Hayes to the hotel before his Midland flight, Miguel and Maria to their cottage, Leora to her apartment. Clifford, Sterling, Howard to their homes. I sat alone on the porch with the last glass of bourbon as the sun finished setting over the hill country. The sky turned the color of Marta's favorite rose garden, deep orange fading to purple. 63 years I'd lived on this land. 11 months someone had tried to take it away through conspiracy and poison and paperwork designed to declare me incompetent. 42 days from the moment I discovered the truth until the December barn confrontation when it all ended. The foundation was running. My children were home. Justice had been served. Pain had become a road for 200 families every year. Martha's voice echoed from 2017, turn pain into road for someone else. I'd done it. We'd done it. You want to know what winning looks like at 63 Whiskey Sunset and every person who fought beside you still breathing around your fire. I took a sip, felt the burn, watched the last light disappear behind the hills. Conrad would serve 25 years. Breyer would serve 12. The irrevocable trust I'd established had saved everything Martha and I built. The ranch would pass to Hayes and Celeste. The foundation would outlive us all. Sometimes old men forget where they put their keys or what day it is or the name of someone they met last week. But there are things old men remember better than anyone else. Love that survives death. Loyalty that can't be bought. Land worth fighting for. Family worth saving. And the difference between apologies that matter and apologies that arrive too late. I finished the bourbon, set the glass down, looked at the empty chairs around the fire pit. Christmas 2024. 1 year after the conspiracy ended, the ranch was quiet. The fire had burned to embers. The stars were coming out. I stood, walked inside, turned off the porch light. Tomorrow Celeste would review January scholarship applications. Hayes would fly back to the Permian Basin. Miguel would check the fence line. Maria would clean the kitchen. Life would continue the way it always had on this ranch, steady, purposeful, rooted in land and love. But tonight I slept, knowing Marta's legacy was secure. My children were home, and the road we'd turn pain into would carry families forward long after my name was forgotten. That was enough. That was everything. And to you, listening to my story, remember this family betrayal doesn't always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it arrives wearing the face of love. I spent 63 years believing that silence protected the people I loved. My father kept secrets to shield my brother from shame. I kept secrets to preserve his dignity. But those hidden truths became the soil where family betrayal took root. Don't make my mistake. Don't confuse silence with protection. The truth told in love, even painful truth, is always stronger than secrets kept in fear. This family story taught me something I wish I'd learned earlier. Loyalty without honesty isn't loyalty at all. It's just enabling betrayal to grow in darkness. When you love someone, you owe them the truth, even when it's hard to give and harder to receive. I believe God allowed this family betrayal to teach me what love really requires, not just protection, but courage. The courage to speak truth, the courage to demand accountability, the courage to forgive without forgetting the lessons. My brother's choices were his own, but my silence made them easier. If this family story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced family betrayal or had to choose between loyalty and truth? Your perspective might help someone else navigating their own difficult path. Please share this with anyone who needs to hear it and subscribe to for more stories about resilience, redemption, and the complicated truth about family. Thank you for staying until the very end of this journey with me. Some details have been adjusted for storytelling and reflection, but the lesson remains true. Secrets don't protect. They starve the very love they were meant to preserve.